Chapter 1, My Village Home. I was a foundling. But until I was 8 years of age, I thought I had a mother like other children. For when I cried, a woman held me tightly in her arms and rocked me gently until my tears stopped falling. I never got into bed without her coming to kiss me, and when the December winds blew the icy snow against the window panes, she would take my feet between her hands and warm them while she sang to me. Even now I can remember the song she used to sing. If a storm came on while I was out minding our cow, she would run down the lane to meet me and cover my head and shoulders with her cotton skirt so that I should not get wet. When I had a quarrel with one of the village boys, she made me tell her all about it, and she would talk kindly to me when I was wrong and praise me when I was in the right. By these and many other things, by the way she spoke to me and looked at me, and the gentle way she scolded me, I believe that she was my mother, my village, or, to be more exact, the village where I was brought up, for I did not have a village of my own, no birthplace, any more than I had a father or mother. The village where I spent my childhood was called Chavanon. It is one of the poorest in France. Only sections of the land could be cultivated, for the great stretch of moors was covered with heather and broom. We lived in a little house down by the brook. Until I was 8 years of age, I had never seen a man in our house. Yet, my adopted mother was not a widow, but her husband, who was a stonecutter, worked in Paris, and he had not been back to the village since I was of an age to notice what was going on around me. Occasionally he sent news by some companion who returned to the village, for there were many of the peasants who were employed as stone cutters in the city. "Mother Barbarin," the man would say, "your husband is quite well, and he told me to tell you that he's still working and to give you this money. Will you count it?" That was all. Mother Barbarin was satisfied. Her husband was well, and he had work. Because Barbarin was away from home, it must not be thought that he was not on good terms with his wife. He stayed in Paris because his work kept him there. When he was old, he would come back and live with his wife on the money that he had saved. One November evening, a man stopped at our gate. I was standing on the doorstep breaking sticks. He looked over the top bar of the gate and called to me to know if Mother Barbarin lived there. I shouted yes and told him to come in. He pushed open the old gate and came slowly up to the house. I had never seen such a dirty man. He was covered with mud from head to foot. It was easy to see that he had come a distance on bad roads. Upon hearing our voices, Mother Barbarin ran out. "I've brought some news from Paris," said the man. Something in the man's tone alarmed Mother Barbarin. "Oh dear," she cried, wringing her hands. "Something has happened to Jerome." "Yes, there is, but don't get scared. He's been hurt, but he ain't dead, but maybe he'll be deformed. I used to share a room with him, and as I was coming back home, he asked me to give you the message. I can't stop, as I've got several miles to go, and it's getting late." But Mother Barbarin wanted to know more. She begged him to stay to supper. The roads were so bad, and they did say that wolves had been seen on the outskirts of the wood. He could go early in the morning. Wouldn't he stay? Yes, he would. He sat down by the corner of the fire, and while eating his supper told us how the accident had occurred. Barbarin had been terribly hurt by a falling scaffold, and as he had had no business to be in that particular spot, the builder had refused to pay an indemnity. "Poor Barbarin," said the man as he dried the legs of his trousers, which were now quite stiff under the coating of mud. "He's got no luck, no luck. Some chaps would get a mint o' money out of an affair like this, but your man won't get nothing, no luck," he said again in such a sympathetic tone, which showed plainly that he for one would willingly have the life half crushed out of his body if he could get a pension. "As I tell him, he ought to sue that builder, a lawsuit," exclaimed Mother Barbarin. "That costs a lot of money. Yes, but if you win. Mother Barbarian wanted to start off to Paris, only it was such a terrible affair. The journey was so long and cost so much. The next morning we went into the village and consulted the priest. He advised her not to go without first finding out if she could be of any use. He wrote to the hospital where they had taken Barbarian, and a few days later received a reply saying that Barbarian's wife was not to go, but that she could send a certain sum of money to her husband, because he was going to sue the builder upon whose works he had met with the accident. Days and weeks passed, and from time to time letters came asking for more money. The last, more insistent than the previous ones, said that, if there was no more money, the cow must be sold to procure the sum. Only those who have lived in the country with the peasants know what distress there is in these 3 words. Sell the cow! As long as they have their cow in the shed, they know that they will not suffer from hunger. We got butter from ours to put in the soup, and milk to moisten the potatoes. We lived so well from ours that until the time of which I write, I had hardly ever tasted meat. But our cow not only gave us nourishment, she was our friend. Some people imagine that a cow is a stupid animal. It is not so. A cow is most intelligent. When we spoke to ours and stroked her and kissed her, she understood us, and with her big round eyes which looked so soft, she knew well enough how to make us know what she wanted and what she did not want. In fact, she loved us, and we loved her, and that is all there is to say. However, we had to part with her, for it was only by the sale of the cow that Barbarian's husband would be satisfied. A cattle dealer came to our house, and after thoroughly examining Rosette, all the time shaking his head and saying that she would not suit him at all, he could never sell her again, she had no milk, she made bad butter, he ended by saying that he would take her, but only out of kindness, because Mother Barbarian was an honest good woman. Poor Rosette, as though she knew what was happening, refused to come out of the barn and began to bellow. Go in at the back of her and chase her out. The man said to me, holding out a whip which he had carried hanging round his neck. No, that he won't, cried Mother. Taking poor Rosette by the loins, she spoke to her softly. There, my beauty, come along then. Rosette could not resist her, and then, when she got to the road, the man tied her up behind his cart and his horse trotted off, and she had to follow. We went back to the house, but for a long time we could hear her bellowing. No more milk, no butter. In the morning a piece of bread, at night some potatoes with salt. Shrove Tuesday happened to be a few days after we had sold the cow. The year before, Mother Barbarian had made a feast for me with pancakes and apple fritters, and I had eaten so many that she had beamed and laughed with pleasure. But now we had no Rosette to give us milk or butter, so there would be no Shrove Tuesday, I said to myself sadly. But Mother Barbarian had a surprise for me. Although she was not in the habit of borrowing, she had asked for a cup of milk from one of the neighbors, a piece of butter from another, and when I got home about midday she was emptying the flour into a big earthenware bowl. Oh, I said, going up to her. Flour? Why, yes, she said, smiling. It's flour, my little Rémi, beautiful flour. See what lovely flakes it makes. Just because I was so anxious to know what the flour was for, I did not dare ask. And besides, I did not want her to know that I remembered that it was Shrove Tuesday, for fear she might feel unhappy. What does one make with flour? She asked, smiling at me. Bread. What else? Pap. And what else? Why, I don't know. Yes, you know, only as you are a good little boy, you don't dare say. You know that today is pancake day, and because you think we haven't any butter and milk, you don't dare speak. Isn't that so, eh? Oh, Mother, I didn't mean that pancake day should be so bad after all for my little Rémi. Look in that bin. I lifted up the lid quickly and saw some milk, butter, eggs, and 3 apples. Give me the eggs. she said. While I break them, you peel the apples. While I cut the apples into slices, she broke the eggs into the flour and began to beat the mixture, adding a little milk from time to time. When the paste was well beaten, she placed the big earthenware bowl on the warm cinders, for it was not until supper time that we were to have the pancakes and fritters. I must say frankly that it was a very long day, and more than once I lifted up the cloth that she had thrown over the bowl. "You'll make the paste cold," she cried, "and it won't rise well." But it was rising well. Little bubbles were coming up on the top, and the eggs and milk were beginning to smell good. "Go and chop some wood," Mother Barbarian said. "We need a good clear fire." At last the candle was lit. "Put the wood on the fire." She did not have to say this twice. I had been waiting impatiently to hear these words. Soon a bright flame leaped up the chimney, and the light from the fire lit up all the kitchen. Then Mother Barbarian took down the frying pan from its hook and placed it on the fire. "Give me the butter." With the end of her knife, she slipped a piece as large as a nut into the pan, where it melted and spluttered. It was a long time since we had smelled that odor. How good that butter smelled! I was listening to it, fizzing, when I heard footsteps out in our yard. Whoever could be coming to disturb us at this hour? A neighbor, perhaps, to ask for some firewood. I couldn't think, for just at that moment, Mother Barbarian put her big wooden spoon into the bowl and was pouring a spoonful of the paste into the pan, and it was not the moment to let one's thoughts wander. Somebody knocked on the door with a stick, then it was flung open. "Who's there?" asked Mother Barbarian without turning round. A man had come in. By the bright flame which lit him up, I could see that he carried a big stick in his hand. "So you're having a feast here? Don't disturb yourselves," he said roughly. "Oh, Lord!" cried Mother Barbarian, putting the frying pan quickly on the floor. "Is it you, Jerome?" Then, taking me by the arm, she dragged me towards the man who had stopped in the doorway. "Here's your father." Chapter 2. My adopted father. Mother Barbarian kissed her husband. I was about to do the same when he put out his stick and stopped me. "What's this?" "You told me." "Well, yes, but it isn't true, because it isn't true, eh?" He stepped towards me with his stick raised. Instinctively I shrunk back. What had I done? Nothing wrong, surely. I was only going to kiss him. I looked at him timidly, but he had turned from me and was speaking to Mother Barbarian. "So you're keeping Shrove Tuesday," he said. "I'm glad, for I'm famished. What have you got for supper?" "I was making some pancakes and apple fritters." "So I see, but you're not going to give pancakes to a man who has covered the miles that I have. I haven't anything else. You see, we didn't expect you." "What?" "Nothing else. Nothing for supper." He glanced round the kitchen. "There's some butter." He looked up at the ceiling, at the spot where the bacon used to hang, but for a long time there had been nothing on the hook, only a few ropes of onions and garlic hung from the beam now. "Here's some onions," he said, knocking a rope down with his big stick. "With 4 or 5 onions and a piece of butter we'll have a good soup. Take out the pancakes and fry the onions in the pan. Take the pancakes out of the frying pan." Without a word, Mother Barbarian hurried to do what her husband asked. He sat down on a chair by the corner of the fireplace. I had not dared to leave the place where his stick had sent me. Leaning against the table, I looked at him. He was a man about 50 with a hard face and rough ways. His head leaned a little bit towards his right shoulder on account of the wound he had received, and this deformity gave him a still more forbidding aspect. Mother Barbarian had put the frying pan again on the fire. "Is it with a little bit of butter like that you're going to try and make a soup?" he asked. Thereupon he seized the plate with the butter and threw it all into the pan. No more butter, then no more pancakes. At any other moment I should have been greatly upset at this catastrophe, but I was not thinking of the pancakes and fritters now. The thought that was uppermost in my mind was that this man who seemed so cruel was my father. My father! Absently, I said the word over and over again to myself. I had never thought much what a father would be. Vaguely, I had imagined him to be a sort of mother with a big voice, but in looking at this one who had fallen from heaven, I felt greatly worried and frightened. I had wanted to kiss him, and he had pushed me away with his stick. Why? My mother had never pushed me away when I went to kiss her. On the contrary, she always took me in her arms and held me tight. Instead of standing there as though you're made of wood, he said, put the plates on the table. I nearly fell down in my haste to obey. The soup was made. Mother Barbarin served it on the plates. Then, leaving the big chimney corner, he came and sat down and commenced to eat, stopping only from time to glance at me. I felt so uncomfortable that I could not eat. I looked at him also, but out of the corner of my eye. Then I turned my head quickly when I caught his eye. Doesn't he eat more than that usually? He asked suddenly. Oh yes, he's got a good appetite. That's a pity. He doesn't seem to want his supper now, though. Mother Barbarin did not seem to want to talk. She went to and fro, waiting on her husband. Ain't you hungry? No. Well then, go to bed and go to sleep at once. If you don't, I'll be angry. My mother gave me a look which told me to obey without answering. But there was no occasion for this warning. I had not thought of saying a word. As in a great many poor homes, our kitchen was also the bedroom. Near the fireplace were all the things for the meals, the table, the pots and pans, and the sideboard. At the other end was the bedroom. In a corner stood Mother Barbarin's big bed. In the opposite corner, in a little alcove, was my bed under a red-figured curtain. I hurriedly undressed and got into bed. But to go to sleep was another thing. I was terribly worried and very unhappy. How could this man be my father? And if he was, why did he treat me so badly? With my nose flattened against the wall, I tried to drive these thoughts away and go to sleep as he had ordered me, but it was impossible. Sleep would not come. I had never felt so wide awake. After a time, I could not say how long, I heard someone coming over to my bed. The slow step was heavy and dragged, so I knew at once that it was not Mother Barbarin. I felt a warm breath on my cheek. Are you asleep? This was said in a harsh whisper. I took care not to answer for the terrible words. I'll be angry, still rang in my ears. He's asleep, said Mother Barbarin. The moment he gets into bed, he drops off. You can talk without being afraid that he'll hear. I ought, of course, to have told him that I was not asleep, but I did not dare. I had been ordered to go to sleep. I was not yet asleep, so I was in the wrong. Well, what about your lawsuit? Asked Mother Barbarin. Lost it. The judge said that I was to blame for being under the scaffold. Thereupon he banged his fist on the table and began to swear, without saying anything that meant anything. Case lost, he went on after a moment. Money lost, all gone, poverty staring us in the face. And as though that isn't enough, when I get back here, I find a child. Why didn't you do what I told you to do? Because I couldn't. You could not take him to a foundling's home. A woman can't give up a little mite like that if she's fed it with her own milk and grown to love it. It's not your child. Well, I wanted to do what you told me, but just at that very moment he fell ill. Ill? Yes. That I couldn't take him to that place. He might have died, but when he got better, well, he didn't get better all at once. After that sickness another came. He coughed so it would have made your heart bleed to hear him. Poor little mite. Our little Nicholas died like that. It seemed to me that if I sent him to the foundling's home, he died also. But after, well, time went on, and I thought that as I'd put off going, I'd put it off a bit longer, How old is he now? 8. Well then, he'll go now to the place where he should have gone sooner, and he won't like it so well now. Oh, Jerome, you won't do that, won't I? And who's going to stop me? Do you think we can keep him always? There was a moment's silence. I was hardly able to breathe. The lump in my throat nearly choked me. After a time, Mother Barberin went on. How Paris has changed you. You wouldn't have spoken like that to me before you went away. Perhaps not. But if Paris has changed me, it's also pretty near killed me. I can't work now. We've got no money. The cow's sold. When we haven't enough to feed ourselves, have we got to feed a child that don't belong to us? He's mine. He's no more yours than mine. Besides, he ain't a country boy. He's no poor man's child. He's a delicate morsel, no arms, no legs. He's the prettiest boy in the village. I don't say he ain't pretty, but sturdy, no. Do you think you can make a working man out of a chit with shoulders like his? He's a city child, and there's no place for city children here. I tell you, he's a fine boy and as intelligent and cute as a little cat. And he's got a good heart, and he'll work for us. In the meantime, we've got to work for him, and I'm no good for much now. If his parents claim him, what will you say? His parents. Has he got any parents? They would have found him by now, if he had. It was a crazy thing for me to think that his parents would come and claim him some day and pay us for his keep. I was a fool, 'cause he was wrapped up in fine clothes trimmed with lace. That wasn't to say that his parents were going to hunt for him. Besides, they're dead. Perhaps they're not. And one day they may come, if you women ain't obstinate. But if they do come, well, we've sent him to the home. But we've said enough. I'll take him tomorrow. I'm going round to see Francois now. I'll be back in an hour. The door was opened and closed again. He had gone. Then I quickly sat up in bed and began to call to Mother Barberin. Say, Mama. She ran over to my bed. Are you going to let me go to the foundlings' home? No, my little Rémi, no. She kissed me and held me tight in her arms. I felt better after that, and my tears dried on my cheeks. You didn't go to sleep then? She asked softly. It wasn't my fault. I'm not scolding you. You heard what he said then? Yes, you're not my mama, but he isn't my father. The last words I had said in a different tone because, although I was unhappy at learning that she was not my mother, I was glad, I was almost proud, to know that he was not my father. This contradiction of my feelings betrayed itself in my voice. Mother Barberin did not appear to notice. Perhaps I ought to have told you the truth, but you seemed so much my own boy that I couldn't tell you I was not your real mother. You heard what Jerome said, my boy. He found you one day in a street in Paris, the Avenue de Brutewell. It was in February, early in the morning. He was going to work when he heard a baby cry, and he found you on a step. He looked about to call someone, and as he did so a man came out from behind a tree and ran away. You cried so loud that Jerome didn't like to put you back on the step again. While he was wondering what to do, some more men came along, and they all decided that they'd take you to the police station. You wouldn't stop crying. Poor mite, you must have been cold. But then, when they got you warm at the station house, you still cried, so they thought you were hungry, and they got you some milk. My, you were hungry? When you'd had enough, they undressed you and held you before the fire. You were a beautiful pink boy, and all dressed in lovely clothes. The lieutenant wrote down a description of the clothes and where you were found, and said that he should have to send you to the home unless one of the men liked to take charge of you. Such a beautiful, fine child it wouldn't be difficult to bring up, he said, and the parents would surely make a search for it and pay anyone well for looking after it. So Jerome said he'd take it. Just at that time I had a baby the same age. So I was well able to feed both you two mites. There, dearie, that was how I came to be your mother. Oh, mama, yes, dearie, there. And at the end of 3 months I lost my own little baby, and then I got even more fond of you. It was such a pity Jerome couldn't forget, and seeing at the end of 3 years that your parents hadn't come after you, he tried to make me send you to the home. You heard why I didn't do as he told me. Oh, don't send me to the home, I cried, clinging to her. Mother, Barbarian, please, please, don't send me to the home. No, dearie, no, you shan't go. I'll settle it. Jerome is not really unkind, you'll see. He's had a lot of trouble, and he is kind of worried about the future. We'll all work, you shall work too. Yes, yes, I'll do anything you want me to do, but don't send me to the home. You shan't go, that is if you promise to go to sleep at once. When he returns he mustn't find you awake. She kissed me and turned me over with my face to the wall. I wanted to go to sleep, but I had received too hard a blow to slip off quietly into slumberland. Dear good mother Barbarian was not my own mother. Then what was a real mother? Something better, something sweeter still? It wasn't possible. Then I thought that a real father might not have held up his stick to me. He wanted to send me to the home. Would mother be able to prevent him? In the village there were 2 children from the home. They were called workhouse children. They had a metal plaque hung round their necks, with a number on it. They were badly dressed, and so dirty. All the other children made fun of them, and threw stones at them. They chased them like boys chase a lost dog, for fun, and because a stray dog has no one to protect it. Oh, I did not want to be like those children. I did not want to have a number hung round my neck. I did not want them to call after me, "Hi, workhouse kid, hi, foundling." The very thought of it made me feel cold and my teeth chatter. I could not go to sleep. And Barbarian was coming back soon, but fortunately he did not return until very late, and sleep came before he arrived. Chapter 3. Signor Vitalis' Company. That night I dreamed that I had been taken to the home. When I opened my eyes in the early morning, I could scarcely believe that I was still there in my little bed. I felt the bed and pinched my arms to see if it were true. Ah, yes, I was still with Mother Barbarian. She said nothing to me all the morning, and I began to think that they had given up the idea of sending me away. Perhaps she had said that she was determined to keep me. But when midday came, Barbarian told me to put on my cap and follow him. I looked at Mother Barbarian to implore her to help me. Without her husband noticing, she made me a sign to go with him. I obeyed. She tapped me on the shoulder as I passed her, to let me know that I had nothing to fear. Without a word I followed him. It was some distance from our house to the village, a good hour's walk. Barbarian never said a word to me the whole way. He walked along limping. Now and again he turned round to see if I was following. Where was he taking me? I asked myself the question again and again. Despite the reassuring sign that Mother Barbarian had made, I felt that something was going to happen to me, and I wanted to run away. I tried to lag behind, thinking that I would jump down into a ditch where Barbarian could not catch me. At first, he had seemed satisfied that I should tramp along just behind him on his heels, but he evidently soon began to suspect what I intended to do, and he grabbed me by the wrist. I was forced to keep up with him. This was the way we entered the village. Everyone who passed us turned round to stare, for I looked like a bad dog held on a leash. As we were about to pass the tavern, a man who was standing in the doorway called to Barbarian and asked him to go in. Barbarian took me by the ear and pushed me in before him, and when we got inside he closed the door. I felt relieved. This was only the village tavern, and for a long time I had wanted to see what it was like inside. I had often wondered what was going on behind the red curtains. I was going to know. Now, Barbarian sat down at a table with the boss who had asked him to go in. I sat by the fireplace. In a corner near me, there was a tall old man with a long white beard. He wore a strange costume. I had never seen anything like it before. Long ringlets fell to his shoulders, and he wore a tall, gray hat ornamented with green and red feathers. A sheepskin, the woolly side turned inside, was fastened round his body. There were no sleeves to the skin, but through two large holes, cut beneath the shoulders, his arms were thrust, covered with velvet sleeves which had once been blue in color. Woolen gaiters reached up to his knees, and to hold them in place a ribbon was interlaced several times round his legs. He sat with his elbow resting on his crossed knees. I had never seen a living person in such a quiet, calm attitude. He looked to me like one of the saints in our church. Lying beside him were three dogs, a white spaniel, a black spaniel, and a pretty little gray dog with a sharp, cute little look. The white spaniel wore a policeman's old helmet, which was fastened under its chin with a leather strap. While I stared at the man in wonder, Barbarian and the owner of the tavern talked in low voices. I knew that I was the subject of their talk. Barbarian was telling him that he had brought me to the village to take me to the mayor's office, so that the mayor should ask the charity home to pay for my keep. That was all that dear Mother Barbarian had been able to do, but I felt that if Barbarian could get something for keeping me, I had nothing to fear. The old man, who without appearing had evidently been listening, suddenly pointed to me, and turning to Barbarian said with a marked foreign accent, "Is that the child that's in your way? That's him. And you think the home is going to pay you for his keep? Lord, as he ain't got no parents and I've been put to great expense for him, it is only right that the town should pay me something. I don't say it isn't, but do you think that just because a thing is right, it's done? That, no, well, then I don't think you'll ever get what you're after." Then he goes to the home. There's no law that forces me to keep him in my place if I don't want to. You agreed in the beginning to take him, so it's up to you to keep your promise. Well, I ain't going to keep him. And when I want to turn him out, I'll do so. Perhaps there's a way to get rid of him now, said the old man after a moment's thought, and make a little money into the bargain. If you'll show me how, I'll stand a drink. Order the drinks, the affair's settled. Sure? Sure. The old man got up and took a seat opposite Barbarian. A strange thing, as he rose, I saw his sheepskin move. It was lifted up, and I wondered if he had another dog under his arm. What were they going to do with me? My heart beat against my side. I could not take my eyes off the old man. You won't let this child eat any more of your bread unless somebody pays for it. That's it, isn't it? That's it, because never mind the reason. That don't concern me. Now, if you don't want him, just give him to me. I'll take charge of him. You? Take charge of him. You want to get rid of him, don't you? Give you a child like him, a beautiful boy, for he is beautiful, the prettiest boy in the village. Look at him. I've looked at him. Rémi, come here. I went over to the table, my knees trembling. There, don't be afraid, little one, said the old man. Just look at him, said Barbarian again. I don't say that he is a homely child. If he was, I wouldn't want him. I don't want a monster. Ah, now, if he was a monster with 2 ears, or even a dwarf, you keep him, you could make your fortune out of a monster. But this little boy is not a dwarf nor a monster, so you can't exhibit him. He's made the same as others, and he's no good for anything. He's good for work. He's not strong him. Land's sakes. He's as strong as any man. Look at his legs. They're that solid. Have you ever seen straighter legs than his? Barbarian pulled up my pants. Too thin, said the old man. And his arms? continued Barbarian, like his legs, might be better. They can't hold out against fatigue and poverty. What, them legs and arms? Feel 'em. Just see for yourself. The old man passed his skinny hand over my legs and felt them, shaking his head the while and making a grimace. I had already seen a similar scene enacted when the cattle dealer came to buy our cow. He also had felt and pinched the cow. He also had shaken his head and said that it was not a good cow. It would be impossible to sell it again, and yet after all he had bought it and taken it away with him. Was the old man going to buy me and take me away with him? Oh, Mother Barbarian! Mother Barbarian! If I had dared, I would have said that only the night before Barbarian had reproached me for seeming delicate and having thin arms and legs. But I felt that I should gain nothing by it but an angry word, so I kept silent. For a long time they wrangled over my good and bad points. Well, such as he is, said the old man at last, I'll take him, but mind you, I don't buy him outright. I'll hire him. I'll give you 20 francs a year for him. 20 francs, that's a good sum, and I'll pay in advance. But if I keep him, the town will pay me more than 10 francs a month. I know what you get from the town, and besides you've got to feed him. He will work. If you thought that he could work, you wouldn't be so anxious to get rid of him. It is not for the money that's paid for their keep that you people take in lost children. It's for the work that you can get out of them. You make servants of them. They pay you, and they themselves get no wages. If this child could have done much for you, you would have kept him. Anyway, I should always have 10 francs a month, and if the home, instead of letting you have him, gave him to someone else, you wouldn't get anything at all. Now with me you won't have to run for your money. All you have to do is to hold out your hand. He pulled a leather purse from his pocket. Counting out 4 silver pieces of money, he threw them down on the table, making them ring as they fell. But think, cried Barbarian, this child's parents will show up one day or the other. What does that matter? Well, those who brought him up will get something. If I hadn't thought of that, I wouldn't have taken him in the first place. Oh, the wicked man! How I did dislike Barbarian! Now, look here, it's because you think his parents won't show up now that you're turning him out, said the old man. Well, if by any chance they do appear, they'll go straight to you, not to me, for nobody knows me. But if it's you who finds them, well, in that case we'll go shares, and I'll put 30 down for him. Now, make it 40. No, for what he'll do for me that isn't possible. What do you want him to do for you? For good legs? He's got good legs. For good arms? He's got good arms. I hold to what I said before. What are you going to do with him? Then the old man looked at Barbarian mockingly, then emptied his glass slowly. He's just to keep me company. I'm getting old, and at night I get a bit lonesome. When one is tired, it's nice to have a child around. Well, for that I'm sure his legs are strong enough. Oh, not too much so, for he must also dance and jump and walk, and then walk and jump again. He'll take his place in Signor Vitalis' traveling company. Where's this company? I am Signor Vitalis, and I'll show you the company right here. With this, he opened the sheepskin and took out a strange animal which he held on his left arm, pressed against his chest. This was the animal that had several times raised the sheepskin, but it was not a little dog, as I had thought. I found no name to give to this strange creature, which I saw for the first time. I looked at it in astonishment. It was dressed in a red coat trimmed with gold braid, but its arms and legs were bare, for they really were arms and legs, and not paws, but they were covered with a black, hairy skin. They were not white or pink. The head, which was as large as a clenched fist, was wide and short. The turned-up nose had spreading nostrils, and the lips were yellow. But what struck me more than anything were the 2 eyes, close to each other, which glittered like glass. "Oh, the ugly monkey!" cried Barbarian. A monkey. I opened my eyes still wider. So this was a monkey, for, although I had never seen a monkey, I had heard of them. So this little, tiny creature that looked like a black baby was a monkey. "This is the star of my company," said Signor Vitalis. "This is Mr. Pretty Heart. Now, Pretty Heart," turning to the animal, "make your bow to the society." The monkey put his hand to his lips and threw a kiss to each of us. "Now," continued Signor Vitalis, holding out his hand to the white spaniel. "The next, Signor Cappy will have the honor of introducing his friends to the esteemed company here present." The spaniel, who up till this moment had not made a movement, jumped up quickly and, standing on his hind paws, crossed his forepaws on his chest and bowed to his master so low that his police helmet touched the ground. This polite duty accomplished, he turned to his companions, and, with one paw still pressed on his chest, he made a sign with the other for them to draw nearer. The two dogs, whose eyes had been fixed on the white spaniel, got up at once, and giving each one of us his paw, shook hands as one does in polite society, and then taking a few steps back, bowed to us in turn. "The one I call Cappy," said Signor Vitalis, "which is an abbreviation of Capitano in Italian, is the chief. He is the most intelligent, and he conveys my orders to the others. That black-haired young dandy is Signor Zerbino, which signifies the sport. Notice him, and I am sure you will admit that the name is very appropriate. And that young person with the modest air is Miss Dulcie. She is English, and her name is chosen on account of her sweet disposition. With these remarkable artistes I travel through the country, earning my living, sometimes good, sometimes bad. It is a matter of luck. Cappy!" The spaniel crossed his paws. "Cappy, come here and be on your best behavior. These people are well brought up, and they must be spoken to with great politeness. Be good enough to tell this little boy who is looking at you with such big, round eyes what time it is." Cappy uncrossed his paws, went up to his master, drew aside the sheepskin, and after feeling in his vest pocket pulled out a large silver watch. He looked at the watch for a moment, then gave two distinct barks. Then after these two decisive sharp barks, he uttered three little barks, not so loud nor so clear. The hour was 3:15. "Very good," said Vitalis. "Thank you, Signor Cappy. And now ask Miss Dulcie to oblige us by dancing with this skipping rope." Cappy again felt in his master's vest pocket and pulled out a cord. He made a brief sign to Zerbino, who immediately took his position opposite to him. Then Cappy threw him one end of the cord, and they both began to turn it very gravely. Then Dulcie jumped lightly into the rope and, with her beautiful soft eyes fixed on her master, began to skip. "You see how intelligent they are," said Vitalis. "Their intelligence would be even more appreciated if I drew comparisons. For instance, if I had a fool to act with them. That is why I want your boy. He is to be the fool so that the dog's intelligence will stand out in a more marked manner." "Oh, he's to be the fool," interrupted Barbarin. "It takes a clever man to play the fool," said Vitalis. "The boy will be able to act the part with a few lessons. We'll test him at once. If he has any intelligence, he will understand that with me he will be able to see the country and other countries besides. But if he stays here, all he can do is to drive a herd of cattle in the same fields from morning to night. If he hasn't any intelligence, he'll cry and stamp his feet, and then I won't take him with me, and he'll be sent to the foundlings' home, where he'll have to work hard and have little to eat." I had enough intelligence to know this. The dogs were very funny, and it would be fun to be with them always, but mother, Barbarin, I could not leave her. Then if I refused, perhaps I should not stay with Mother Barbarin. I might be sent to the home. I was very unhappy, and as my eyes filled with tears, Signor Vitalis tapped me gently on the cheek. "Ah, The little chap understands because he does not make a great noise. He is arguing the matter in his little head, and tomorrow, oh sir, I cried, let me stay with Mother Barbarian. Please let me stay. I could not say more, for Cappy's loud barking interrupted me. At the same moment the dog sprang towards the table upon which Pretty Heart was seated. The monkey, profiting by the moment when everyone was occupied with me, had quickly seized his master's glass, which was full of wine, and was about to empty it. But Cappy, who was a good watchdog, had seen the monkey's trick, and like the faithful servant that he was, he had foiled him. "Mr. Pretty Heart," said Vitalis severely, "you are a glutton and a thief. Go over there into the corner and turn your face to the wall, and you, Zerbino, keep guard. If he moves, give him a good slap. As to you, Mr. Cappy, you are a good dog. Give me your paw. I'd like to shake hands with you." The monkey, uttering little stifled cries, obeyed and went into the corner, and the dog, proud and happy, held out his paw to his master. "Now," continued Vitalis, "back to business. I'll give you 30 francs for him then, no 40. A discussion commenced, but Vitalis soon stopped it by saying, "This doesn't interest the child. Let him go outside and play." At the same time he made a sign to Barbarian. "Yes, go out into the yard at the back, but don't move or you'll have me to reckon with." I could not but obey. I went into the yard, but I had no heart to play. I sat down on a big stone and waited. They were deciding what was to become of me. What would it be? They talked for a long time. I sat, waiting, and it was an hour later when Barbarian came out into the yard. He was alone. Had he come to fetch me to hand me over to Vitalis? "Come," he said. "Back home." Home. Then I was not to leave Mother Barbarian? I wanted to ask questions, but I was afraid, because he seemed in a very bad temper. We walked all the way home in silence. But just before we arrived home, Barbarian, who was walking ahead, stopped. "You know," he said, taking me roughly by the ear, "if you say one single word of what you have heard today, you shall smart for it. Understand?" Chapter 4. The Maternal House. "Well," asked Mother Barbarian when we entered, "what did the mayor say? We didn't see him." "How? You didn't see him?" "No, I met some friends at the Notre Dame Cafe, and when we came out it was too late. So we'll go back tomorrow." So Barbarian had given up the idea of driving a bargain with the man with the dogs. On the way home, I wondered if this was not some trick of his, returning to the house, but his last words drove all my doubts away. As we had to go back to the village the next day to see the mayor, it was certain that Barbarian had not accepted Vitalis' terms, but in spite of his threats I would have spoken of my fears to Mother Barbarian if I could have found myself alone for one moment with her. But all the evening Barbarian did not leave the house, and I went to bed without getting the opportunity. I went to sleep thinking that I would tell her the next day. But the next day when I got up, I did not see her. As I was running all round the house looking for her, Barbarian saw me and asked me what I wanted. "Mama, she has gone to the village and won't be back till this afternoon." She had not told me the night before that she was going to the village, and without knowing why, I began to feel anxious. Why didn't she wait for us if we were going in the afternoon? Would she be back before we started? Without knowing quite why, I began to feel very frightened, and Barbarian looked at me in a way that did not tend to reassure me. To escape from his look, I ran into the garden. Our garden meant a great deal to us. In it we grew almost all that we ate: potatoes, cabbages, carrots, turnips. There was no ground wasted, yet Mother Barbarian had given me a little patch all to myself, in which I had planted ferns and herbs that I had pulled up in the lanes while I was minding the cow. I had planted everything pell-mell, one beside the other, in my bit of garden. It was not beautiful, but I loved it. It was mine. I arranged it as I wished, just as I felt at the time, and when I spoke of it, which happened 20 times a day, it was my garden. Already the jonquils were in bud, and the lilac was beginning to shoot, and the wallflowers would soon be out. How would they bloom? I wondered, and that was why I came to see them every day. But there was another part of my garden that I studied with great anxiety. I had planted a vegetable that someone had given to me, and which was almost unknown in our village. It was Jerusalem artichokes. I was told they would be delicious, better than potatoes, for they had the taste of French artichokes, potatoes, and turnips combined. Having been told this, I intended them to be a surprise for Mother Barberin. I had not breathed a word about this present I had for her. I planted them in my own bit of garden. When they began to shoot, I would let her think that they were flowers. Then one fine day when they were ripe, while she was out, I would pull them up and cook them myself. How? I was not quite sure, but I did not worry over such a small detail. Then when she returned to supper, I would serve her a dish of Jerusalem artichokes. It would be something fresh to replace those everlasting potatoes, and Mother Barberin would not suffer too much from the sale of poor Rosette. And the inventor of this new dish of vegetables was I, Rémi. I was the one. So I was of some use in the house. With such a plan in my head, I had to bestow careful attention on my Jerusalem artichokes. Every day I looked at the spot where I had planted them. It seemed to me that they would never grow. I was kneeling on both knees on the ground, supported on my hands, with my nose almost touching the earth where the artichokes were sown, when I heard Barberin calling me impatiently. I hurried back to the house. Imagine my surprise when I saw, standing before the fireplace, Vitalis and his dogs. I knew at once what Barberin wanted of me. Vitalis had come to fetch me, and it was so that Mother Barberin should not stop me from going that Barberin had sent her to the village. Knowing full well that I could expect nothing from Barberin, I ran up to Vitalis. "Oh, don't take me away! Please, sir, don't take me away!" I began to sob. "Now, little chap," he said, kindly enough, "you won't be unhappy with me. I don't whip children, and you'll have the dogs for company. Why should you be sorry to go with me, Mother Barberin? Anyhow, you're not going to stay here," said Barberin roughly, taking me by the ear. "Go with this gentleman or go to the workhouse. Choose. No, no." "Mama! Mama! So you're going to make me mad, eh?" cried Barberin. "I'll beat you good and hard and chase you out of the house. The child is sorry to leave his mama. Don't beat him for that. He's got feelings. That's a good sign. If you pity him, he'll cry all the more." Well, now to business. Saying that, Vitalis laid 8 5-franc pieces on the table, which Barberin, with a sweep of his hand, cleared up and thrust into his pocket. "Where's his bundle?" asked Vitalis. "Here it is," said Barberin, handing him a blue cotton handkerchief tied up at the 4 corners. "There are 2 shirts and a pair of cotton pants. That was not what was agreed. You said you'd give some clothes. These are only rags. He ain't got no more. If I ask the boy, I know he'll say that's not true. But I haven't the time to argue the matter. We must be off. Come on, my little fellow. What's your name?" "Rémi." "Well then, Rémi, take your bundle and walk along beside Cappy." I held out both my hands to him, then to Barberin. But both men turned away their heads. Then Vitalis took me by the wrist. I had to go. Our poor little house. It seemed to me when I passed over the threshold that I left a bit of my body there. With my eyes full of tears, I looked around, but there was no one near to help me. No one on the road, and no one in the field close by. I began to call, "Mama, Mother Barberin," but no one replied to my call, and my voice trailed off into a sob. I had to follow Vitalis, who had not let go of my wrist. "Goodbye and good luck," cried Baron. Then he entered the house. It was over. "Come, Rémi, hurry along, my child," said Vitalis. He took hold of my arm, and I walked side by side with him. Fortunately, he did not walk fast. I think he suited his step to mine. We were walking uphill. As I turned, I could still see Mother Barberin's house, but it was getting smaller and smaller. Many a time I had walked this road, and I knew that for a little while longer I should still see the house. Then when we turned the bend, I should see it no more. Before me the unknown, behind me was the house, where until that day I had lived such a happy life. Perhaps I should never see it again. Fortunately, the hill was long, but at last we reached the top. Vitalis had not let go his hold. "Would you let me rest a bit?" I asked. "Surely, my boy," he replied. He let go of me, but I saw him make a sign to Cappy, and the dog understood. He came close to me. I knew that Cappy would grab me by the leg if I attempted to escape. I went up a high grassy mound and sat down, the dog beside me. With tear-dimmed eyes, I looked about for Mother Barberin's cottage. Below was the valley and the wood, and away in the distance stood the little house I had left. Little puffs of yellow smoke were coming out of the chimney, going straight up in the sky, and then on towards us. In spite of the distance and the height, I could see everything very clearly. On the rubbish heap, I could see our big fat hen running about, but she did not look as big as usual. If I had not known that it was our hen, I should have taken her for a little pigeon. At the side of the house, I could see the twisted pear tree that I used to ride as a horse. In the stream, I could just make out the drain that I had so much trouble in digging, so that it would work a mill made by my own hands. The wheel, alas, had never turned, despite all the hours I had spent upon it. I could see my garden. Oh, my dear garden! Who would see my flowers bloom? And my Jerusalem artichokes, who would tend them? Baron, perhaps, that wicked Baron. With the next step, my garden would be hidden from me. Suddenly, on the road which led to our house from the village, I saw a white sunbonnet. Then it disappeared behind some trees. Then it came in view again. The distance was so great that I could only see a white top, like a spring butterfly. It was going in and out amongst the trees. But there is a time when the heart sees better and farther than the sharpest eyes. I knew it was Mother Barbering. It was she. I was sure of it. "Well," asked Vitalis, "shall we go on now?" "Oh, sir, no. Please, no. Then it is true what they say. You haven't any legs, tired out already. That doesn't promise very good days for us." I did not reply. I was looking. It was Mother Barbering. It was her bonnet. It was her blue skirt. She was walking quickly as though she was in a hurry to get home. When she got to our gate, she pushed it open and went quickly up the garden path. I jumped up at once and stood up on the bank, without giving a thought to Cappy, who sprang towards me. Mother Barbering did not stay long in the house. She came out and began running to and fro in the yard, with her arms stretched out. It was Mother Barbering. It was her bonnet. It was her blue skirt. She was walking quickly as though she was in a hurry to get home. When she got to our gate, she pushed it open and went quickly up the garden path. I jumped up at once and stood up on the bank, without giving a thought to Cappy, who sprang towards me. Mother Barbering did not stay long in the house. She came out and began running to and fro in the yard, with her arms stretched out. She was looking for me. I leaned forwards and, at the top of my voice, I cried, "Mama! Mama!" But my cry could not reach her. It was lost in the air. "What's the matter? Have you gone crazy?" asked Vitalis. I did not reply. My eyes were still fixed on Mother Barberin. But she did not look up, for she did not know that I was there above her. She went round the garden, then out into the road, looking up and down. I cried louder, but like my first call it was useless. Then Vitalis understood, and he also came up on the bank. It did not take him long to see the figure with the white sunbonnet. "Poor little chap," he said softly to himself. "Oh," I sobbed, encouraged by his words of pity. "Do let me go back." But he took me by the wrist and drew me down and onto the road. "As you are now rested," he said, "we'll move on." I tried to free myself, but he held me firmly. "Cappy! Zerbino," he said, looking at the dogs. The two dogs came close to me, Cappy behind, Zerbino in front. After taking a few steps I turned round. We had passed the bend of the hill, and I could no longer see the valley nor our house. Chapter 5. En route. Because a man pays 40 francs for a child, that is not to say that he is a monster, and that he intends to eat the child. Vitalis had no desire to eat me, and although he bought children, he was not a bad man. I soon had proof of this. We had been walking in silence for some time. I heaved a sigh. "I know just how you feel," said Vitalis. "Cry all you want, but try and see that this is for your own good. Those people are not your parents. The wife has been good to you, and I know that you love her. That is why you feel so badly. But she could not keep you if the husband did not want you. And he may not be such a bad chap after all. He is ill and can't do any more work. He'll find it hard to get along." Yes, what he said was true, but I had only one thought in my mind. Perhaps I should never again see the one I loved most in the world. "You won't be unhappy with me," he continued. "It is better than being sent to the home. And let me tell you, you must not try to run away, because if you do, Cappy and Zerbino would soon catch you." Run away? I no longer thought of doing so. Where should I go? This tall, old man perhaps would be a kind master after all. I had never walked so far at a stretch. All around us were barren lands and hills, not beautiful like I had thought the world would be outside of my village. Vitalis walked with big regular strides, carrying pretty hard on his shoulder or in his bag, and the dogs trotted close to us. From time to time Vitalis said a word of friendship to them, sometimes in French, sometimes in a language that I did not understand. Neither he nor the animals seemed to get tired. But I was exhausted. I dragged my limbs along, and it was as much as I could do to keep up with my new master. Yet I did not like to ask him to let me stop. "It's those wooden shoes that tire you," he said, looking down at me. "When we get to Ussel, I'll buy you some shoes." These words gave me courage. I had always longed for a pair of shoes. The mayor's son and the innkeeper's son wore shoes, so that on Sunday, when they came to church, they seemed to slide down the stone aisles, while we other country boys in our clogs made a deafening noise. "Is Ussel far? Ah, that comes from your heart," said Vitalis, laughing. "So you want to have a pair of shoes, do you? Well, I'll promise you them, and with big nails too. And I'll buy you some velvet pants and a vest and a hat. That'll make you dry your tears, I hope, and give you legs to do the next 6 miles. Shoes with nails." I was overcome with pride. It was grand enough to have shoes, but shoes with nails. I forgot my grief. Shoes with nails, velvet pants, a vest, a hat. Oh, if Mother Barberin could see me, how happy she would be. How proud of me. But in spite of the promise that I should have shoes and velvet pants at the end of the 6 miles, it seemed impossible that I could cover the distance. The sky, which had been blue when we started, was now filled with gray clouds, and soon a fine rain commenced to fall. Vitalis was covered well, enough with his sheepskin, and he was able to shelter Pretty Heart, who, at the first drop of rain, had promptly retired into his hiding place. But the dogs and I had nothing to cover us, and soon we were drenched to the skin. The dogs from time to time could shake themselves, but I was unable to employ this natural means, and I had to tramp along under my water-soaked, heavy garments, which chilled me. "Do you catch cold easily?" asked my new master. "I don't know. I don't remember ever having a cold. That's good. So there is something in you. But I don't want to have it. Worse for you than we are obliged. There is a village a little farther on, and we'll sleep there." There was no one in this village, and no one wanted to take into their homes an old beggar who dragged along with him a child and 3 dogs, soaked to the skin. "No lodgings here," they said, and they shut the door in our faces. We went from one house to another, but all refused to admit us. Must we tramp those 4 miles on to Ussel, without resting a bit? The night had fallen and the rain had chilled us through and through. Oh, for Mother Barberin's house! Finally a peasant, more charitable than his neighbors, agreed to let us go into his barn. But he made the condition that we could sleep there, but must have no light. "Give me your matches," he said to Vitalis. "I'll give you them back tomorrow when you go." At least we had a roof to cover us from the storm. In the sack which Vitalis had slung over his back, he took out a hunch of bread and broke it into 4 pieces. Then I saw for the first time how he maintained obedience and discipline in his company. Whilst we had gone from door to door seeking shelter, Zerbino had gone into a house, and he had run out again almost at once, carrying in his jaws a crust. Vitalis had only said, "All right, Zerbino, tonight." I had thought no more of this theft. When I saw Vitalis cut the roll, Zerbino looked very dejected. Vitalis and I were sitting on a box with Pretty Heart between us. The 3 dogs stood in a row before us, Cappy and Dulcie with their eyes fixed on their master. Zerbino stood with drooping ears and tail between his legs. "The thief must leave the ranks and go into a corner," said Vitalis in a tone of command. "He'll go to sleep without his supper." Zerbino left his place, and in a zigzag went over to the corner that Vitalis indicated with his finger. He crouched down under a heap of hay, out of sight, but we heard him breathe plaintively with a little whine. Vitalis then handed me a piece of bread, and while eating his own he broke little pieces for Pretty Heart, Cappy and Dulcie. How I longed for Mother Barberin soup, even without butter, and the warm fire, and my little bed with the coverlets that I pulled right up to my nose. Completely faggied out, I sat there, my feet raw by the rubbing of my clogs. I trembled with cold in my wet clothing. It was night now, but I did not think of going to sleep. "Your teeth are chattering," said Vitalis. "Are you cold?" "A little." I heard him open his bag. "I haven't got much of a wardrobe," he said, "but here's a dry shirt and a vest you can put on. Then get underneath the hay, and you'll soon get warm and go to sleep." But I did not get warm as quick as Vitalis thought. For a long time I turned and turned on my bed of straw, too unhappy to sleep. Would all my days now be like this, walking in the pouring rain, sleeping in a loft, shaking with cold, and only a piece of dry bread for supper? No one to love me, no one to cuddle me, no Mother Barberin. My heart was very sad. The tears rolled down my cheeks. Then I felt a warm breath pass over my face. I stretched out my hand, and my finger touched Cappy's woolly coat. He had come softly to me, stepping cautiously on the straw, and he smelt me. He sniffed gently. His breath ran over my cheek and in my hair. What did he want? Presently he laid down on the straw, quite close to me, and very gently he commenced to lick my hand. Touched by this caress, I sat up on my straw bed, and, throwing my arms round his neck, kissed his cold nose. He gave a little, stifled cry, and then quickly put his paw in my hand and remained quite still. I forgot my fatigue and my sorrows. I was no longer alone. I had a friend. Chapter 6, My Debut. We started early the next morning. The sky was blue and a light wind had come up in the night and dried all the mud. The birds were singing blithely in the trees, and the dogs scampered around us. Now and again, Cappy stood up on his hind paws and barked into my face 2 or 3 times. I knew what he meant. He was my friend. He was intelligent, and he understood everything, and he knew how to make you understand. In his tail only was more wit and eloquence than in the tongue or in the eyes of many people. Although I had never left my village and was most curious to see a town, what I most wanted to see in that town was a boot shop. Where was the welcome shop where I should find the shoes with nails that Vitalis had? Promise me? I glanced about in every direction as we passed down the old streets of Ussel. Suddenly my master turned into a shop behind the market. Hanging outside the front were some old guns, a coat trimmed with gold braid, several lamps, and some rusty keys. We went down 3 steps and found ourselves in a large room where the sun could never have entered since the roof had been put on the house. How could such beautiful things as nailed shoes be sold in such a terrible place? Yet Vitalis knew, and soon I had the pleasure of being shod in nailed shoes, which were 10 times as heavy as my clogs. My master's generosity did not stop there. He bought me a blue velvet coat, a pair of trousers, and a felt hat, velvet for me who had never worn anything but cotton. This was surely the best man in the world and the most generous. It is true that the velvet was creased, and that the woolen trousers were well worn, and it was difficult to guess what had been the original color of the felt hat. It had been so soaked with rain, but dazzled by so much finery I was unconscious of the imperfections which were hidden under their aspect. When we got back to the inn, to my sorrow and astonishment, Vitalis took a pair of scissors and cut the 2 legs of my trousers to the height of the knees before he would let me get into them. I looked at him with round eyes. "That's because I don't want you to look like everybody else," he explained. "When in France I'll dress you like an Italian, when in Italy like a French boy." I was still more amazed. "We are artistes, are we not? Well, we must not dress like the ordinary folk. If we went about dressed like the country people, do you think anybody would look at us? Should we get a crowd around us when we stop? No. Appearances count for a great deal in life." I was a French boy in the morning, and by night I had become an Italian. My trousers reached my knees. Vitalis interlaced red cords all down my stockings and twisted some red ribbon all over my felt hat, and then decorated it with a bunch of woolen flowers. I don't know what others thought of me, but to be frank I must admit that I thought I looked superb, and Cappy was of the same opinion, for he stared at me for a long time, then held out his paw with a satisfied air. I was glad to have Cappy's approval, which was all the more agreeable, because during the time I had been dressing, Pretty Heart had seated himself opposite to me, and with exaggerated airs had imitated every movement I had made, and when I was finished put his hands on his hips, threw back his head, and laughed mockingly. It is a scientific question as to whether monkeys laugh or not. I lived on familiar terms with Pretty Heart for a long time, and I know that he certainly did laugh, and often in a way that was most humiliating to me. Of course, he did not laugh like a man, but when something amused him, he would draw back the corners of his mouth, screw up his eyes, and work his jaws rapidly, while his black eyes seemed to dart flames. "Now you're ready," said Vitalis, as I placed my hat on my head, "and we'll get to work, because tomorrow is market day, and we must give a performance. You must play in a comedy with the 2 dogs and Pretty Heart, but I don't know how to play a comedy," I cried, scared. "That is why I am going to teach you. You can't know unless you learn. These animals have studied hard to learn their part. It has been hard work for them, but now I'll see how clever they are. The piece we are going to play is called Mr. Pretty Heart Servant, or The Fool Is Not Always the One You Would Think. Now this is it. Mr. Pretty Heart's servant, whose name is Cappy, is about to leave him because he is getting old. And Cappy has promised his master that before he leaves he will get him another servant. Now this successor is not to be a dog, it is to be a boy, a country boy named Rémi. Oh, you have just come from the country to take a position with Mr. Pretty Heart. Monkeys don't have servants. In plays they have. Well, you come straight from your village and your new master thinks that you're a fool. Oh, I don't like that. What does that matter if it makes the people laugh? Well, you have come to this gentleman to be his servant, and you are told to set the table. Here is one like we shall use in the play. Go and set it. On this table there were plates, a glass, a knife, a fork, and a white tablecloth. How could I arrange all those things? As I pondered over this question, leaning forward with hands stretched out and mouth open, not knowing where to begin, my master clapped his hands and laughed heartily. "Bravo!" he cried. "Bravo! That's perfect." The boy I had before put on a sly expression as much as to say, "See what a fool I can make of myself. You are natural." "That is splendid, but I don't know what I have to do. That's why you are so good. After you do know, you will have to pretend just what you are feeling now. If you can get that same expression and stand just like you are standing now, you'll be a great success. To play this part to perfection, you have only to act and look as you do at this moment. Mr. Pretty Heart Servant was not a great play. The performance lasted not more than 20 minutes. Vitalis made us do it over and over again, the dogs and I. I was surprised to see our master so patient. I had seen the animals in my village treated with oaths and blows when they could not learn, although the lesson lasted a long time. Not once did he get angry, not once did he swear. "Now do that over again," he said severely, when a mistake had been made. "That is bad, Cappy. I'll scold you, Pretty Heart, if you don't pay attention." And that was all, but yet it was enough. "Take the dogs for an example," he said, while teaching me. "Compare them with Pretty Heart. Pretty Heart has, perhaps, vivacity and intelligence, but he has no patience. He learns easily what he is taught, but he forgets it at once. Besides, he never does what he is told, willingly. He likes to do just the contrary. That is his nature, and that is why I do not get angry with him. Monkeys have not the same conscience that a dog has. They don't understand the meaning of the word duty, and that is why they are inferior to the dog. Do you understand that? I think so. You are intelligent and attentive. Be obedient. Do your best in what you have to do. Remember that all through life." Talking to him so, I summoned up courage to ask him about what had so astonished me during the rehearsal. How could he be so wonderfully patient with the dogs, the monkey, and myself? He smiled. "One can see that you have lived only with peasants who are rough with animals, and think that they can only be made to obey by having a stick held over their heads. A great mistake. One gains very little by being cruel, but one can obtain a lot, if not all, by gentleness. It is because I am never unkind to my animals that they are what they are. If I had beaten them, they would be frightened creatures. Fear paralyzes the intelligence. Besides, if I gave way to temper, I should not be what I am. I could not have acquired this patience which has won their confidence. That shows that who instructs others instructs himself. As I have given lessons to my animals, so I have received lessons from them. I have developed their intelligence. They have formed my character." I laughed. This seemed strange to me. You find that odd, he continued. Odd that a dog could give a lesson to a man, yet it is true. The master is obliged to watch over himself when he undertakes to teach a dog. The dog takes after the master. Show me your dog, and I'll tell you what you are. The criminal has a dog who is a rogue. The burglar's dog is a thief. The country yokel has a stupid, unintelligent dog. A kind, thoughtful man has a good dog. I was very nervous at the thought of appearing before the public the next day. The dogs and the monkey had the advantage over me. They had played before, hundreds of times. What would Vitalis say if I did not play my part well? What would the audience say? I was so worried that, when at last I dropped off to sleep, I could see in my dreams a crowd of people holding their sides with laughter because I was such a fool. I was even more nervous the next day when we marched off in a procession to the marketplace, where we were to give our performance. Vitalis led the way. Holding his head high and with chest thrown out, he kept time with his arms and feet while gaily playing his fife. Behind him came Cappy, carrying Pretty Heart on his back, wearing the uniform of an English general, a red coat and trousers trimmed with gold braid and helmet topped with a plume. Zerbino and Dulcie came next, at a respectful distance. I brought up the rear. Our procession took up some length as we had to walk a certain space apart. The piercing notes of the fife brought the people running from their houses. Scores of children ran behind us, and by the time we had reached the square, there was a great crowd. Our theater was quickly arranged. A rope was fastened to 4 trees, and in the middle of this square we took our places. The first numbers on the program consisted of various tricks performed by the dogs. I had not the slightest notion what they did. I was so nervous and taken up in repeating my own part. All that I remember was that Vitalis put aside his fife and took his violin and played accompaniments to the dogs' maneuvers. Sometimes it was dance music, sometimes sentimental airs. The tricks over, Cappy took a metal cup between his teeth and began to go the round of the distinguished audience. When a spectator failed to drop a coin in, he put his 2 forepaws upon the reluctant giver's pocket, barked 3 times, then tapped the pocket with his paw. At this every one laughed and shouted with delight. If that ain't a cunning spaniel! He knows who's got money and who hasn't. Say, out with it. He'll give something, not he, and his uncle left him a legacy. The stingy cuss. And, finally, a penny was dug out of a deep pocket and thrown into the cup. During this time, Vitalis, without saying a word, but with his eyes following Cappy, gaily played his violin. Soon Cappy returned to his master, proudly carrying the full cup. Now for the comedy. Ladies and gentlemen, said Vitalis, gesticulating with his bow in one hand and his violin in the other, we are going to give a delightful comedy called Mr. Pretty Heart Servant, or The Fool is Not Always the One You Would Think. A man of my standing does not lower himself by praising his plays and actors in advance. All I have to say is look, listen, and be ready to applaud. What Vitalis called a delightful comedy was really a pantomime. Naturally, it had to be for the very good reason that 2 of its principals, Pretty Heart and Cappy, could not speak. And the third, myself, was incapable of uttering 2 words. However, so that the audience would clearly understand the play, Vitalis explained the various situations as the piece progressed. For instance, striking up a warlike air, he announced the entrance of General Pretty Heart, who had won his high rank in various battles in India. Up to that day, General Pretty Heart had only had Cappy for a servant, but he now wished to have a human being as his means allowed him this luxury. For a long time, animals had been the slaves of men, but it was time that such was changed. While waiting for the servant to arrive, the general walked up and down, smoking his cigar. You should see the way he blew the smoke into the onlookers' faces. Becoming impatient, he began to roll his eyes like a man who is about to have a fit of temper. He bit his lips and stamped on the ground. At the third stamp, I had to make my appearance on the scene, led by Cappy. If I had forgotten my part, the dog would have reminded me. At a given moment, he held out his paw to me and introduced me to the general. The latter, upon noticing me, held up his two hands in despair. What? Was that the servant they had procured for him? Then he came and looked pertly up into my face and walked around me, shrugging his shoulders. His expression was so comical that everyone burst out laughing. They quite understood that the monkey thought I was a fool. The spectators thought that also. The piece was made to show how dense was my stupidity, while every opportunity was afforded the monkey to show his sagacity and intelligence. After having examined me thoroughly, the general, out of pity, decided to keep me. He pointed to a table that was already set for luncheon and signed to me to take my seat. The general thinks that after his servant has had something to eat he won't be such an idiot, explained Vitalis. I sat down at the little table. A table napkin was placed on my plate. What was I to do with the napkin? Cappy made a sign for me to use it. After looking at it thoughtfully for a moment, I blew my nose. Then the general held his sides with laughter, and Cappy fell over with his four paws up in the air, upset at my stupidity. Seeing that I had made a mistake, I stared again at the table napkin, wondering what I was to do with it. Then I had an idea. I rolled it up and made a necktie for myself. More laughter from the general. Another fall from Cappy, his paws in the air. Then, finally overcome with exasperation, the general dragged me from the chair, seated himself at my place, and ate up the meal that had been prepared for me. Ah! He knew how to use a table napkin. How gracefully he tucked it into his uniform and spread it out upon his knees. And with what an elegant air he broke his bread and emptied his glass. The climax was reached when, luncheon over, he asked for a toothpick, which he quickly passed between his teeth. At this, applause broke out on all sides, and the performance ended triumphantly. What a fool of a servant, and what a wonderful monkey! On our way back to the inn, Vitalis complimented me, and I was already such a good comedian that I appreciated this praise from my master. Chapter 7: Child and Animal Learning. Vitalis' small group of actors were certainly very clever, but their talent was not very versatile. For this reason, we were not able to remain long in the same town. 3 days after our arrival in Ussel, we were on our way again. Where were we going? I had grown bold enough to put this question to my master. Do you know this part of the country? He asked, looking at me. No. Then why do you ask where we are going? So as to know. To know what? I was silent. Do you know how to read? He asked, after looking thoughtfully at me for a moment. No. Then I'll teach you from a book the names and all about the towns through which we travel. It will be like having a story told to you. I had been brought up in utter ignorance. True, I had been sent to the village school for 1 month, but during this month I had never once had a book in my hand. At the time of which I write, there were many villages in France that did not even boast of a school, and in some, where there was a schoolmaster, either he knew nothing, or he had some other occupation and could give little attention to the children confided to his care. This was the case with the master of our village school. I do not mean to say that he was ignorant, but during the month that I attended his school, he did not give us one single lesson. He had something else to do. By trade he was a shoemaker, or rather, a clog maker, for no one bought shoes from him. He sat at his bench all day, shaving pieces of beechwood into clogs. So I learnt absolutely nothing at school, not even my alphabet. "Is it difficult to read?" I asked, after we had walked some time in silence. "Have you got a hard head?" "I don't know, but I'd like to learn if you'll teach me." "Well, we'll see about that. We've plenty of time ahead of us." Time ahead of us. Why not commence at once? I did not know how difficult it was to learn to read. I thought that I just had to open a book and, almost at once, know what it contained. The next day, as we were walking along, Vitalis stooped down and picked up a piece of wood covered with dust. "See, this is the book from which you are going to learn to read," he said. "A book? A piece of wood?" I looked at him to see if he were joking, but he looked quite serious. I stared at the bit of wood. It was as long as my arm and as wide as my two hands. There was no inscription or drawing on it. "Wait until we get to those trees down there, where we'll rest," said Vitalis, smiling at my astonishment. "I'll show you how I'm going to teach you to read from this." When we got to the trees, we threw our bags on the ground and sat down on the green grass with the daisies growing here and there. Pretty Heart, having got rid of his chain, sprang up into a tree and shook the branches one after the other, as though he were making nuts fall. The dogs lay down beside us. Vitalis took out his knife and, after having smoothed the wood on both sides, began to cut tiny pieces, 12 all of equal size. "I am going to carve a letter out of each piece of wood," he said, looking up at me. I had not taken my eyes off of him. "You will learn these letters from their shapes, and when you are able to tell me what they are at first sight, I'll form them into words. When you can read the words, then you shall learn from a book." I soon had my pockets full of little bits of wood, and was not long in learning the letters of the alphabet, but to know how to read was quite another thing. I could not get along very fast, and often I regretted having expressed a wish to learn. I must say, however, it was not because I was lazy, it was pride. While teaching me my letters, Vitalis thought that he would teach Cappy at the same time. If a dog could learn to tell the hour from a watch, why could he not learn the letters? The pieces of wood were all spread out on the grass, and he was taught that with his paw he must draw out the letter for which he was asked. At first I made more progress than he, but if I had quicker intelligence, he had better memory. Once he learnt a thing, he knew it. Always. He did not forget. When I made a mistake, Vitalis would say, "Cappy will learn to read before you, Rémi." And Cappy, evidently understanding, proudly shook his tail. I was so hurt that I applied myself to the task with all my heart, and, while the poor dog could get no farther than pulling out the 4 letters which spelled his name, I finally learned to read from a book. "Now that you know how to read words, how would you like to read music?" asked Vitalis. "If I knew how to read music, could I sing like you?" I asked. "Ah, so you would like to sing like me?" he answered. "I know that would be impossible, but I'd like to sing a little. Do you like to hear me sing?" "Then, I like it more than anything. It is better than the nightingales, but it's not like their song at all. When you sing, sometimes I want to cry, and sometimes I want to laugh. Don't think me silly, master, but when you sing those songs, I think that I am back with dear Mother Barberin. If I shut my eyes, I can see her again in our little house. And yet I don't know the words you sing, because they are Italian." I looked up at him and saw the tears standing in his eyes. Then I stopped and asked him if what I had said hurt him. "No, my child," he said, his voice shaking. "You do not pain me. On the contrary, you take me back to my younger days. Yes, I will teach you to sing, little Rémi, and, as you have a heart, you also will make people weep with your songs." He stopped suddenly, and I felt that he did not wish to say more at that moment. I did not know the reason why he should feel sad. The next day, he cut out little pieces of wood for the music notes, the same as he had for the letters. The notes were more complicated than the alphabet, and this time I found it much harder and more tedious to learn. Vitalis, so patient with the dogs, more than once lost patience with me. With an animal, he cried. One controls oneself, because one is dealing with a poor dumb creature, but you are enough to drive me mad. He threw up his hands dramatically. Pretty Heart, who took special delight in imitating gestures he thought funny, mimicked my master, and as the monkey was present at my lessons every day, I had the humiliation to see him lift his arms in despair every time I hesitated. "See, Pretty Heart is even mocking you," cried Vitalis. If I had dared, I would have said that he mocked the master just as much as the pupil, but respect, as well as a certain fear, forbade me. Finally, after many weeks of study, I was able to sing an air from a piece of paper that Vitalis himself had written. That day my master did not throw up his hands, but instead patted me on the cheek, declaring that if I continued thus, I should certainly become a great singer. Chapter 8. One who had known a king. Our mode of traveling was very simple. We went straight ahead, anywhere, and when we found a village, which from the distance looked sufficiently important, we began preparations for a triumphal entry. I dressed the dogs, and combed Dulce's hair, stuck a plaster over Cappy's eye when he was playing the part of an old grouchy man, and forced Pretty Heart into his general's uniform. That was the most difficult thing I had to do, for the monkey, who knew well enough that this was a prelude to work for him, invented the oddest tricks to prevent me from dressing him. Then I was forced to call Cappy to come to my aid, and between the two of us we finally managed to subdue him. The company all dressed, Vitalis took his fife, and we went in marching order into the village. If the number of people who trooped behind us was sufficient, we gave a performance, but if we had only a few stragglers, we did not think it worth our while to stop, so continued on our way. When we stayed several days in a town, Vitalis would let me go about alone if Cappy was with me. He trusted me with Cappy. "You are traveling through France at the age when most boys are at school," he once said to me. "Open your eyes, look and learn. When you see something that you do not understand, do not be afraid to ask me questions. I have not always been what you see me now. I have learnt many other things." What? We will speak of that later. For the present, listen to my advice, and when you grow up, I hope you will think with a little gratitude of the poor musician of whom you were so afraid when he took you from your adopted mother. The change may not be bad for you after all. I wondered what my master had been in the days gone by. We tramped on until we came to the plains of Quercy, which were very flat and desolate. There was not a brook, pond, or river to be seen. In the middle of the plain, we came to a small village called Bastide-Marat. We spent the night in a barn belonging to the inn. It was here in this village, said Vitalis, and probably in this inn, that a man was born who led thousands of soldiers to battle and who, having commenced his life as a stable boy, afterwards became a king. His name was Marat. They called him a hero, and they named this village after him. I knew him and often talked with him. When he was a stable boy, no, replied Vitalis, laughing. When he was a king. This is the first time I have been in this part of the country. I knew him in Naples, where he was king. You have known a king. The tone in which I said this must have been rather comical, for my master laughed heartily. We were seated on a bench before the stable door, our backs against the wall, which was still hot from the sun's rays. The locusts were chanting their monotonous song in a great sycamore, which covered us with its branches. Over the tops of the houses the full moon, which had just appeared, rose gently in the heavens. The night seemed all the more beautiful because the day had been scorchingly hot. "Do you want to go to bed?" asked Vitalis. "Or would you like me to tell you the story of King Marat? Oh, tell me the story." Then he told me the story of King Marat. For hours we sat on the bench. As he talked, the pale light from the moon fell across him, and I listened in rapt attention, my eyes fixed on his face. I had not heard this story before. Who would have told me? Not Mother Barbarin, surely. She did not know anything about it. She was born at Chavanon, and would probably die there. Her mind had never traveled farther than her eyes. My master had seen a king, and this king had spoken to him. What was my master in his youth, and how had he become what I saw him now in his old age? We had been tramping since morning. Vitalis had said that we should reach a village by night where we could sleep, but night had come, and I saw no signs of this village, no smoke in the distance to indicate that we were near a house. I could see nothing but a stretch of plains ahead of us. I was tired, and longed to go to sleep. Vitalis was tired also. He wanted to stop and rest by the roadside, but instead of sitting down beside him, I told him that I would climb a hill that was on the left of us and see if I could make out a village. I called Cappy, but Cappy also was tired, and turned a deaf ear to my call. This he usually did when he did not wish to obey me. "Are you afraid?" asked Vitalis. His question made me start off at once, alone. Night had fallen. There was no moon, but the twinkling stars in the sky threw their light on a misty atmosphere. The various things around me seemed to take on a strange, weird form in the dim light. Wild firs grew in bushes beside some huge stones, which, towering above me, seemed as though they turned to look at me. The higher I climbed, the thicker became the trees and shrubs, their tops passing over my head and interlacing. Sometimes I had to crawl through them to get by. Yet I was determined to get to the top of the hill. But when at last I did, and gazed around, I could see no light anywhere, nothing but strange shadows and forms, and great trees which seemed to hold out their branches to me, like arms ready to enfold me. I listened to see if I could catch the bark of a dog. Chapter 9. Arrested. I had a pleasant remembrance of Pau, the beautiful winter resort where the wind scarcely ever blew. We stayed there the whole winter, for we were taking in quite a lot of money. Our audience consisted mostly of children, and they were never tired if we did give the same performance over and over again. They were children of the rich, mostly English and American. Fat little boys, with ruddy skins, and pretty little girls, with soft eyes almost as beautiful as Dulce's. It was from these children that I got a taste for candy, for they always came with their pockets stuffed with sweets, which they divided between Pretty Heart, the dogs, and myself. But when the spring approached, our audience grew smaller. One by one, two by two, the little ones came to shake hands with Pretty Heart, Cappy, and Dulcie. They had come to say goodbye. They were going away. So we also had to leave the beautiful winter resort and take up our wandering life again. For a long time, I do not know how many days or weeks, we went through valleys, over hills, leaving behind the bluish top of the Pyrenees, which now looked like a mass of clouds. Then one night we came to a great town with ugly red brick houses and with streets paved with little pointed stones, hard to the feet of travelers who had walked a dozen miles a day. My master told me that we were in Toulouse and that we should stay there for a long time. As usual, the first thing we did was to look about for a suitable place to hold the next day's performance. Suitable places were not lacking, especially near the botanical gardens, where there is a beautiful lawn, shaded with big trees, and a wide avenue leading to it. It was in one of the sidewalks that we gave our first performance. A policeman stood by while we arranged our things. He seemed annoyed, either because he did not like dogs, or because he thought we had no business there. He tried to send us away. It would have been better if we had gone. We were not strong enough to hold out against the police, but my master did not think so. Although he was an old man strolling about the country with his dogs, he was very proud. He considered that, As he was not breaking the law, he should have police protection. So, when the officer wanted to send us away, he refused to leave. Vitalis was very polite. In fact, he carried his Italian politeness to the extreme. One might have thought that he was addressing some high-end, mighty personage. "The illustrious gentleman who represents the police authority," he said, taking off his hat and bowing low to the policeman. "Can he show me an order emanating from the said authority which states that it is forbidden for poor strolling players, like ourselves, to carry on their humble profession on a public square?" The policeman replied that he would have no argument. "We must obey." "Certainly," replied Vitalis, "and I promise that I will do as you order, as soon as you let me know by what authority you issue it." That day the officer turned on his heels, and my master, with hat in hand, body bent low, smilingly bowed to the retreating form. But the next day the representative of the law returned, and jumping over the ropes which enclosed our theater, he sprang into the middle of the performance. "Muzzle those dogs," he said roughly to Vitalis. "Muzzle my dogs. It's an order of the law. You ought to know that." The spectators began to protest. "Don't interrupt. Let him finish the show." "Cop." Vitalis then took off his felt hat, and with his plume sweeping the ground, he made 3 stately bows to the officer. "The illustrious gentleman representing the law, does he tell me that I must muzzle my actors?" he asked. "Yes, and be quick about it. Muzzle Capi, Zerbino, and Dulcie," cried Vitalis, addressing himself more to the audience than to the officer. "How can the great physician, Capi, known throughout the universe, prescribe a cure for Mr. Pretty Heart if the said physician wears a muzzle on the end of his nose?" The children and parents began to laugh. Vitalis, encouraged by the applause, continued, "And how can the charming nurse, Dulcie, use her eloquence to persuade the patient to take the horrible medicine which is to relieve him of his pains if I am forced to carry out this cruel order of the law? I ask the audience if this is fair?" The clapping of hands and shouts of laughter from the onlookers was answer enough. They cheered Vitalis and hooted the policeman, and, above all, they were amused at the grimaces Pretty Heart was making. He had taken his place behind the illustrious gentleman who represented the law, and was making ridiculous grimaces behind his back. The officer crossed his arms, then uncrossed them, and stuck his fists on his hips, and threw back his head. So did the monkey. The onlookers screamed with laughter. The officer turned round suddenly to see what amused them, and saw the monkey striking his own attitude to perfection. For some moments the monkey and the man stared at each other. It was a question which would lower his eyes first. The crowd yelled with delight. "If your dogs are not muzzled tomorrow," cried the policeman angrily, shaking his fist, "you'll be arrested. That's all. Good day, until tomorrow, Signor," said Vitalis, bowing. "Until tomorrow." As the officer strode away, Vitalis stood with his body almost bent to the ground in mock respect. I thought that he would buy some muzzles for the dogs, but he did nothing of the kind, and the evening passed without him even mentioning his quarrel with the policeman. I decided at last to broach the subject myself. "If you don't want Cappy to tear off his muzzle tomorrow during the performance," I said, "I think it would be a good thing to put it on him beforehand and let him get used to it. We can teach him that he must keep it on. You think I am going to put one of those things on their little noses? The officer is down on us. You are only a country boy. Like all peasants, you are afraid of a policeman." "Don't worry," he added. "I'll have matters arranged tomorrow so that the policeman can't have me arrested, and at the same time so that the dogs won't be uncomfortable. On the other hand, the public shall be amused a bit. This officer should be the means of bringing us some more money and, in the bargain, play the comic role in the piece that I shall prepare for him. Now, tomorrow, you are to go there alone with Pretty Heart. You will arrange the ropes and play a few pieces on your harp, and when you have a large audience, the officer will arrive on the scene. I will make my appearance with the dogs. Then the farce will commence. I did not at all like going alone the next day, but I knew that my master must be obeyed. As soon as I got to our usual place, I roped off an enclosure and commenced to play. The people came from all parts and crowded outside the ropes. By now I had learnt to play the harp and sing very well. Amongst other songs, I had learnt a Neapolitan canzonetta which was always greatly applauded. But today I knew that the crowd had not come to pay tribute to my talent. All who had witnessed the dispute with the officer the day before were present, and had brought their friends with them. The police are not liked it to lose, and the public were curious to see how the old Italian would come out, and what significance was attached to his parting words. "Until tomorrow, Signor." Several of the spectators, seeing me alone with Pretty Heart, interrupted my song to ask if the old Italian was coming. I nodded. The policeman arrived. Pretty Heart saw him first. He at once put his clenched hands on his hips and began trotting around in a ridiculously important manner. The crowd laughed at his antics and clapped their hands. The officer glared at me angrily. How was it going to end? I was rather ill at ease. If Vitalis were there, he could reply to the officer. But I was alone. If he ordered me away, what should I say? The policeman strode back and forth outside the ropes, and when he passed near me, he had a way of looking at me over his shoulder that did not reassure me. Pretty Heart did not understand the seriousness of the situation, so he gleefully strutted along inside the ropes, side by side with the officer, mimicking his every movement. As he passed me, he also looked at me over his shoulder in such a comical manner that the people laughed still louder. I thought the matter had gone far enough, so I called Pretty Heart, but he was in no mood to obey, and continued his walk, running and dodging me when I tried to catch him. I don't know how it happened, but the policeman, probably mad with rage, thought that I was encouraging the monkey, for he quickly jumped the ropes. In a moment he was upon me, and had knocked me to the ground with one blow. When I opened my eyes and got to my feet, Vitalis, who had sprung from I don't know where, stood before me. He had just seized the policeman's wrist. "I forbid you to strike that child," he cried. "What a cowardly thing to do!" For some moments the two men looked at each other. The officer was purple with rage. My master was superb. He held his beautiful white head high. His face expressed indignation and command. His look was enough to make the policeman sink into the earth, but he did nothing of the kind. He wrenched his hand free, seized my master by the collar, and roughly pushed him before him. Vitalis stumbled and almost fell, but he drew himself up quickly, and with his free hand struck the officer on the wrist. My master was a strong man, but still he was an old man, and the policeman was young and robust. I saw how a struggle would end. But there was no struggle. "You come along with me," said the officer. "You're under arrest. Why did you strike that child?" demanded Vitalis. "No talk. Follow me." Vitalis did not reply, but turned round to me. "Go back to the inn," he said, "and stay there with the dogs. I'll send word to you." He had no chance to say more, for the officer dragged him off. So ended the performance that my poor master had wanted to make amusing. The dogs at first had followed their master, but I called them back, and, accustomed to obey, they returned to me. I noticed that they were muzzled, but instead of their faces being enclosed in the usual dog muzzle, they simply wore a pretty piece of silk fastened round their noses and tied under their chins. Cappy, who was white, wore red. Zerbino, who was black, wore white, and Dulcie, who was gray, wore blue. My poor master had thus carried out the order of the law, the public had quickly dispersed. A few stragglers remained to discuss what had happened. The old man was right. He was wrong. Why did the cop strike the boy? He did nothing to him, never said a word. Bad business. The old fellow will go to jail, for sure. I went back to the inn depressed. I had grown very fond of my master, more and more every day. We lived the same life together from morning till night, and often from night to morning, when we had to sleep on the same bed of straw. No father could have shown more care for his child than he showed for me. He had taught me to read, to sing, and to write. During our long tramps, he gave me lessons, first on one subject then on another. On very cold days, he shared his coverings with me. On hot days, he had always helped me carry the bags and the various things which I was supposed to carry. And when we ate, he never served me the worst piece, keeping the best for himself. On the contrary, he shared it equally, the good and the bad. It is true, he sometimes pulled my ears more roughly than I liked, but if I needed the correction, what of that? In a word, I loved him, and he loved me. For how long would they send him to prison? What should I do during that time? How should I live? Vitalis was in the habit of carrying his money on him, and he had not had time to give me anything before he was dragged off. I had only a few sous in my pocket. Would it be enough to buy food for Pretty Heart, the dogs, and myself? I spent the next 2 days in agony, not daring to leave the inn. The monkey and the dogs were also very downcast. At last, on the 3rd day, a man brought me a letter from him. Vitalis wrote me that on the following Saturday he was to be tried for resisting police authority and for attacking an officer. I was wrong to get into a temper, he wrote. This may cost me dearly, but it is too late now. Come to the court, you will learn a lesson. Then he gave me some advice and sent his love to me, telling me to caress the animals for him. While I was reading the letter, Cappy, standing between my feet, put his nose to the paper and sniffed it. I could see by the way he wagged his tail that he knew it had come from his master. This was the first time in 3 days that he had showed any signs of joy. I got to the court early on Saturday morning. Many of the people who had witnessed the scene with the policeman were present. I was so scared at being in court that I got behind a large stove and squeezed up as small as I could against the wall. Some men who had been arrested for robbery, others for fighting, were tried first. All said that they were innocent, but all were found guilty. At last Vitalis was brought in. He sat down on a bench between 2 policemen. What he said at first, and what they asked him, I scarcely knew. My emotion was so great. I stared at Vitalis. He stood upright, his white head thrown back. He looked ashamed and worried. I looked at the judge. You gave blows to the officer who arrested you, said the judge. Not blows, Your Honor, said Vitalis. I only struck once. When I got to the place where we were to give our performance, I was just in time to see the officer fell a child to the ground with a blow. The little boy who is with me, the child is not yours, no? But I love him as my own son. When I saw him struck, I lost my temper and seized the policeman's arm so that he could not strike again. You struck him. When he laid his hands on me, I thought of him only as a man, not as a police officer. The officer then said what he had to say. Vitalis' eyes roamed around the room. I knew that he was looking to see if I were there, so I decided to come out of my hiding place, and, elbowing through the crowd of people, I came and stood beside him. His face lit up when he saw me. Presently, the trial ended. He was sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment and a fine of 100 francs. 2 months' prison. The door through which Vitalis had entered was opened. Through my tears, I saw him follow a policeman, and the door closed behind him. 2 months' separation. Where should I go? Chapter 10. Homeless. When I returned to the inn with heavy heart and red eyes, the landlord was standing in the yard. I was going to pass him to get to my dogs, but he stopped me. "Well, what about your master?" he asked. "He is sentenced. How long?" "2 months prison." "How much fine?" 100 francs. 2 months. 100 francs. He repeated 2 or 3 times. I wanted to go on, but again he stopped me. "What are you going to do these 2 months?" "I don't know, sir." "Oh, you don't know. You've got some money to live on and to buy food for your animals, I suppose." "No, sir." "Then do you count on me keeping you?" "No, sir. I don't count on anyone." That was true. I did not count upon anyone. "Your master already owes me a lot of money," he continued. "I can't board you for 2 months without knowing if I shall be paid. You'll have to go." "Go? Where shall I go, sir?" "That's not my business. I'm nothing to you. Why should I keep you?" For a moment I was dazed. The man was right. Why should he give me shelter? "Come, take your dogs and monkey and get out. Of course you must leave your master's bag with me. When he comes out of jail, he'll come here to get it, and then he can settle his account." An idea came to me. "As you know, he will settle his bill then. Can't you keep me until then, and add what I cost to it?" "Ah! Your master might be able to pay for 2 days' lodging, but 2 months. That's a different thing. I'll eat as little as you wish, and your dogs and monkey." "No, be off. You'll pick up enough in the villages. But, sir, how will my master find me when he comes out of prison?" "He'll come to look for me here. All you've got to do is to come back on that day, and if he writes to me, I'll keep the letter, but if I don't answer him, oh, stop your talk. Hurry up and get out. I give you 5 minutes. If I find you here when I come out again, I'll settle you." I knew it was useless to plead with him. I had to get out. I went to the stables to get the dogs and Pretty Heart. Then, strapping my harp on my shoulder, I left the inn. I was in a hurry to get out of town, for my dogs were not muzzled. What should I say if I met a policeman? That I had no money? It was the truth. I had only 11 sous in my pocket. That was not enough to buy muzzles. They might arrest me. If Vitalis and I were both in prison, whatever would become of the animals? I felt the responsibility of my position. As I walked along quickly, the dogs looked up at me in a way I could not fail to understand. They were hungry. Pretty Heart, whom I carried, pulled my ear from time to time to force me to look at him. Then he rubbed his stomach in a manner that was no less expressive than the looks the dogs cast at me. I also was hungry. We had had no breakfast. My 11 sous could not buy enough for dinner and supper, so we should have to be satisfied with one meal, which, if we took it in the middle of the day, would serve us for 2. I wandered along. I did not care where I went. It was all the same to me, for I did not know the country. The question of finding a place in which to sleep did not worry me. We could sleep in the open air. But to eat, we must have walked for about 2 hours before I dared to stop, and yet the dogs had looked up at me imploringly, and Pretty Heart had pulled my ear and rubbed his stomach incessantly. At last I felt that I was far enough away from the town to have nothing to fear. I went into the first bakery that I came across. I asked for 1 pound and a half of bread. "You'd do well to take a 2-pound loaf," said the woman. "That's not too much for your menagerie. You must feed the poor dogs." Oh no, it was not too much for my menagerie, but it was too much for my purse. The bread was 5 sous a pound. 2 pounds would cost 10 sous. I did not think it wise to be extravagant before knowing what I was going to do the next day. I told the woman in an offhand manner that 1 pound and a half was quite enough, and politely asked her not to cut more. I left the shop with my bread clutched tightly in my arms. The dogs jumped joyfully around me. Pretty Heart pulled my hair and chuckled with glee. We did not go far. At the first tree that we saw, I placed my harp against the trunk and sat down on the grass. The dog sat opposite me, Cappy in the middle, Dulcie at one side, Zerbino on the other. Pretty Heart, who was not tired, stood up on the watch, ready to snatch the first piece that he could. To eke out the meal was a delicate matter. I cut the bread into 5 parts, as near the same size as possible, and distributed the slices. I gave each a piece in turn, as though I were dealing cards. Pretty Heart, who required less food than we, fared better, for he was quite satisfied while we were still famished. I took 3 pieces from a share and hid them in my bag to give the dogs later. Then, as there still remained a little piece, I broke it, and we each had some that was for dessert. After the meal, I felt that the moment had come for me to say a few words to my companions. Although I was their chief, I did not feel that I was too much above them not to wish them to take part in the grave situation in which we found ourselves. Cappy had probably guessed my intentions, for he sat with his big, intelligent eyes fixed on me. "Yes, Cappy," I said. "And you, Dulcie, Zerbino, and Pretty Heart, my friends, I've bad news for you. We shan't see our master for 2 whole months." "Wah!" barked Cappy. "It's bad for him, and it's also bad for us, for we depend on him for everything, and now he's gone, we haven't any money." At the mention of the word money, which he perfectly understood, Cappy rose on his hind paws and commenced to trot round as though he were collecting money from the distinguished audience. "I see you want to give a performance, Cappy," I continued. "That's good advice, but should we make anything? That's the question. We have only 3 sous left, so you mustn't get hungry. You've all to be very obedient. That will make it easier for us all. You must help me, all you can, you dogs, and Pretty Heart. I want to feel that I can count on you." I would not make so bold as to say that they understood all I said, but they got the general idea. They knew by our master's absence that something serious had happened, and they had expected an explanation from me. If they did not understand all that I said to them, they were at least satisfied that I had their welfare at heart, and they showed their satisfaction by the attention they gave me. Attention? Yes, on the part of the dogs only. It was impossible for Pretty Heart to keep still for long. He could not fix his mind upon one subject for more than a minute. During the first part of my discourse, he had listened to me with the greatest interest, but before I had said 20 words, he had sprung up into a tree, the branches of which hung over our heads, and was now swinging himself from branch to branch. If Cappy had insulted me in like manner, my pride would certainly have been hurt, but I was never astonished at anything Pretty Heart might do. He was so empty-headed. But after all, it was quite natural that he should want to have a little fun. I admit that I would like to have done the same. I would have gone up that tree with pleasure, but the importance and dignity of my present office did not permit me any such distractions. After we had rested a while, I gave the sign to start. We had to find a place somewhere to lie down for the night and gain a few sous for our food for the next day. We walked for 1 hour, then came in sight of a village. I quickly dressed my troop, and in as good marching order as possible we made our entry. Unfortunately, we had no fife, and we lacked Vitalis' fine, commanding presence. Like a drum major, he always attracted the eye. I had not the advantage of being tall, nor was I possessed of a wonderful head. Quite the reverse, I was small and thin, and I must have worn a very anxious look. While marching, I glanced to the right and to the left to see what effect we were producing. Very little, I regret to say. No one followed us. Upon reaching the small square upon which was a fountain shaded with trees, I took my harp and commenced to play a waltz. The music was gay, my fingers were light, but my heart was heavy. I told Zerbino and Dulcie to waltz together. They obeyed me at once and commenced to whirl round, keeping time. But no one put themselves out to come and see us, and yet in the doorways I saw several women knitting and talking. I continued to play. Zerbino and Dulcie went on with their waltz. Perhaps if one decided to come over to us, a second would come, then more and more. I played on and on. Zerbino and Dulcie went round and round, but the women in the doorways did not even look over at us. It was discouraging, but I was determined not to be discouraged. I played with all my might, making the chords of my harp vibrate, almost to breaking them. Suddenly a little child, taking its first steps, trotted from his home and came towards us. No doubt the mother would follow him, and after the mother a friend would come, and we should have an audience, and then a little money. I played more softly so as not to frighten the baby, and also to entice him to come nearer. With hands held out and swaying first on one foot, then on the other, he came on slowly. A few steps more, and he would have reached us, but at that moment the mother looked round. She saw her baby at once, but instead of running after him, as I had thought she would, she called to him, and the child obediently turned round and went back to her. Perhaps these people did not like dance music. It was quite possible. I told Zerbino and Dulcie to lie down, and I began to sing my canzonetta. Never did I try so hard to please. I had reached the end of the second line when I saw a man in a round jacket, and I felt that he was coming towards me. At last, I tried to sing with even more fervor. "Hello, what are you doing here, young rogue?" he cried. I stopped, amazed at his words, and watched him coming nearer with my mouth open. "What are you doing here, I say, singing, sir? Have you got permission to sing on a public square in our village?" "No, sir." "Well, be off. If you don't, I'll have you arrested." "But, sir, be off, you little beggar." I knew from my poor master's example what it would cost me if I went against the town authorities. I did not make him repeat his order. I hurried off. Beggar? That was not fair. I had not begged, I had sung. In 5 minutes, I had left behind me this inhospitable, but well-guarded village. My dogs followed me with their heads lowered, and their tails between their legs. They certainly knew that some bad luck had befallen us. Cappy, from time to time, went ahead of us and turned round to look at me, questioningly with his intelligent eyes. Anyone else in his place would have questioned me, but Cappy was too well bred to be indiscreet. I saw his lip tremble in the effort he made to keep back his protests. When we were far enough away from the village, I signed to them to stop, and the 3 dogs made a circle round me, Cappy in the middle, his eyes on mine. "As we had no permission to play, they sent us away," I explained. "Well then?" asked Cappy, with a wag of his head. "So then we shall have to sleep in the open air, and go without supper." At the word supper, there was a general bark. I showed them my 3 sous. "You know that is all we have. If we spend those 3 sous tonight, we shall have nothing left for breakfast tomorrow. So, as we have had something today, it is better to save this." And I put my 3 sous back in my pocket. Cappy and Dulcie bent their heads resignedly, but Zerbino, who was not so good, and who besides was a gourmand, continued to growl. I looked at him severely. "Cappy," explained Zerbino, "he doesn't seem to understand." I said to faithful Capitano. Cappy at once tapped Zerbino with his paw. It seemed as though an argument was taking place between the 2 dogs. One may find the word argument too much when applied to dogs, but animals certainly have a peculiar language of their kind. As to dogs, they not only know how to speak, they know how to read. Look at them with their noses in the air, or, with lowered head, sniffing at the ground, smelling the bushes and stones. Suddenly they'll stop before a clump of grass or a wall and remain on the alert for a moment. We see nothing on the wall, but the dog reads all sorts of curious things written in mysterious letters, which we do not understand. What Cappy said to Zerbino I did not hear, for if dogs can understand the language of men, men do not understand their language. I only saw that Zerbino refused to listen to reason, and that he insisted that the 3 sous should be spent immediately. Cappy got angry, and it was only when he showed his teeth that Zerbino, who was a bit of a coward, lapsed into silence. The word silence is also used advisedly. I mean by silence that he laid down. The weather was beautiful, so that to sleep in the open air was not a serious matter. The only thing was to keep out of the way of the wolves. If there were any in this part of the country, we walked straight ahead on the white road until we found a place. We had reached a wood. Here and there were great blocks of granite. The place was very mournful and lonely, but there was no better, and I thought that we might find shelter from the damp night air amongst the granite. When I say we, I mean Pretty Heart and myself, for the dogs would not catch cold sleeping out of doors. I had to be careful of myself, for I knew how heavy was my responsibility. What would become of us all if I fell ill, and what would become of me if I had Pretty Heart to nurse? We found a sort of grotto between the stones, strewn with dried leaves. This was very nice. All that was lacking was something to eat. I tried not to think that we were hungry. Does not the proverb say, "He who sleeps eats"? Before lying down I told Cappy that I relied upon him to keep watch, and the faithful dog, instead of sleeping with us on the pine leaves, laid down like a sentinel at the entrance of our quarters. I could sleep in peace, for I knew that none would come near without me being warned by Cappy. Yet, although at rest on this point, I could not sleep at once. Pretty Heart was asleep beside me, wrapped up in my coat. Zerbino and Dulcie were stretched at my feet. But my anxiety was greater than my fatigue. This first day had been bad. What would the next day be? I was hungry and thirsty, and yet I only had 3 sous. How could I buy food for all, if I did not earn something the next day? And the muzzles? And the permission to sing? Oh, what was to be done? Perhaps we should all die of hunger in the bushes. While turning over these questions in my mind, I looked up at the stars, which shone in the dark sky. There was not a breath of wind. Silence everywhere. Not the rustle of a leaf or the cry of a bird, nor the rumble of a cart on the road. As far as my eye could see stretched space. How alone we were, how abandoned. The tears filled my eyes. Poor Mother Barbarin. Poor Vitalis. I was lying on my stomach, crying into my hands, when suddenly I felt a breath pass through my hair. I turned over quickly, and a big soft tongue licked my wet cheek. It was Cappy, who had heard me crying and had come to comfort me as he had done on the first day of my wanderings. With my 2 hands I took him by the neck and kissed him on his wet nose. He uttered 2 or 3 little mournful snorts, and it seemed to me that he was crying with me. I slept. When I awoke it was full day, and Cappy was sitting beside me, looking at me. The birds were singing in the trees. In the distance I could hear a church bell ringing the Angelus, the morning prayer. The sun was already high in the sky, throwing its bright rays down to comfort heart and body. We started off, going in the direction of the village where we should surely find a baker. When one goes to bed without dinner or supper, one is hungry early in the morning. I made up my mind to spend the 3 sous, and after that we would see what would happen. Upon arriving in the village there was no need for me to ask where the baker lived. Our noses guided us straight to the shop. My sense of smell was now as keen as that of my dogs. From the distance I sniffed the delicious odor of hot bread. We could not give much for 3 sous, when it costs 5 sous a pound. Each of us had but a little piece, so our breakfast was soon over. We had to make money that day. I walked through the village to find a favorable place for a performance, and also to note the expressions of the people, to try and guess if they were enemies or friends. My intention was not to give the performance at once. It was too early, but after finding a place, we would come back in the middle of the day and take a chance. I was engrossed with this idea when suddenly I heard someone shouting behind me. I turned round quickly and saw Zerbino racing towards me, followed by an old woman. It did not take me long to know what was the matter. Profiting by my preoccupation, Zerbino had run into a house and stolen a piece of meat. He was racing alone, carrying his booty in his jaws. "Thief! Thief!" cried the old woman. "Catch him! Catch all of him!" When I heard her say this, I felt that somehow I was guilty, or at least that I was responsible for Zerbino's crime, so I began to run. What could I say to the old woman if she demanded the price of the stolen meat? How could I pay her? If we were arrested, they would put us in prison. Seeing me flying down the road, Dulcie and Cappy were not long following my example. They were at my heels, while Pretty Heart, whom I carried on my shoulder, clung round my neck so as not to fall. Someone else cried, "Stop, thief!" and others joined in the chase. But we raced on. Fear gave us speed. I never saw Dulcie run so fast. Her feet barely touched the ground. Down a side street and across a field we went, and soon we had outstripped our pursuers, but I did not stop running until I was quite out of breath. We had raced at least 2 miles. I turned round. No one was following us. Cappy and Dulcie were still at my heels. Zerbino was in the distance. He had stopped probably to eat his piece of meat. I called him, but he knew very well that he deserved a severe punishment, so instead of coming to me, he ran away as fast as he could. He was famished, that was why he had stolen the meat, but I could not accept this as an excuse. He had stolen. If I wanted to preserve discipline in my troop, the guilty one must be punished. If not, in the next village Dulcie would do the same. And then Cappy would succumb to the temptation. I should have to punish Zerbino publicly. But in order to do that I should have to catch him, and that was not an easy thing to do. I turned to Cappy. "Go and find Zerbino," I said gravely. He started off at once to do what I told him, but it seemed to me that he went with less ardor than usual. From the look that he gave me, I saw that he would far rather champion Zerbino than be my envoy. I sat down to await his return with the prisoner. I was pleased to get a rest after our mad race. When we stopped running, we had reached the bank of a canal with shady trees and fields on either side. An hour passed. The dogs had not returned. I was beginning to feel anxious when at last Cappy appeared alone, his head hanging down. "Where is Zerbino?" Cappy lay down in a cowed attitude. I looked at him and noticed that one of his ears was bleeding. I knew what had happened. Zerbino had put up a fight. I felt that, although Cappy had obeyed my orders, he had considered that I was too severe and had let himself be beaten. I could not scold him. I could only wait until Zerbino chose to return. I knew that sooner or later he would feel sorry and would come back and take his punishment. I stretched myself out under a tree, holding Pretty Heart tight for fear he should take it into his head to join Zerbino. Dulcie and Cappy slept at my feet. Time passed. Zerbino did not appear. At last I also dropped off to sleep. Several hours had passed when I awoke. By the sun I could tell that it was getting late, but there was no need for the sun to tell me that. My stomach cried out that it was a long time since I had eaten that piece of bread. And I could tell from the looks of the 2 dogs and Pretty Heart that they were famished. Cappy and Dulcie fixed their eyes on me piteously. Pretty Heart made grimaces. But still Zerbino had not come back. I called to him, I whistled, but in vain. Having well lunched, he was probably digesting his meal, cuddled up in a bush. The situation was becoming serious. If I left this spot, Zerbino perhaps would get lost, for he might not be able to find us. Then if I stayed, there was no chance of me making a little money to buy something to eat. Our hunger became more acute. The dogs fixed their eyes on me imploringly, and Pretty Heart rubbed his stomach and squealed angrily. Still Zerbino did not return. Once more I set Cappy to look for the truant, but at the end of half an hour he came back alone. What was to be done? Although Zerbino was guilty, and through his fault we were put into this terrible position, I could not forsake him. What would my master say if I did not take his 3 dogs back to him? And then, in spite of all, I loved Zerbino, the rogue. I decided to wait until evening, but it was impossible to remain inactive. If we were doing something, I thought we might not feel the pangs of hunger so keenly. If I could invent something to distract us, we might, for the time being, forget that we were so famished. What could we do? I pondered over the question. Then I remembered that Vitalis had told me that when a regiment was tired out by a long march, the band played the gayest airs, so that the soldiers should forget their fatigue. If I played some gay pieces on my harp, perhaps we could forget our hunger. We were all so faint and sick, yet if I played something lively, and made the 2 poor dogs dance with Pretty Heart, the time might pass quicker. I took my instrument, which I had placed up against a tree, and, turning my back to the canal, I put my animals in position and began to play a dance. At first neither the dogs nor the monkeys seemed disposed to dance. All they wanted was food. My heart ached as I watched their pitiful attitude. But they must forget their hunger, poor little things. I played louder and quicker, then, little by little, the music produced its customary effect. They danced and I played on and on. Suddenly I heard a clear voice, a child's voice, call out, "Bravo!" The voice came from behind me. I turned round quickly. A barge had stopped on the canal. The 2 horses which dragged the boat were standing on the opposite bank. It was a strange barge. I had never seen one like it. It was much shorter than the other boats on the canal, and the deck was fashioned like a beautiful veranda, covered with plants and foliage. I could see 2 people, a lady, who was still young, with a beautiful sad face, and a boy about my own age, who seemed to be lying down. It was evidently the little boy who had called out, "Bravo!" I was very surprised at seeing them. I lifted my hat to thank them for their applause. "Are you playing for your own pleasure?" asked the lady, speaking French with a foreign accent. "I am keeping the dogs in practice, and also, it diverts their attention." The child said something. The lady bent over him. "Will you play again?" she then asked, turning round to me. Would I play? Play for an audience who had arrived at such a moment. I did not wait to be asked twice. "Would you like a dance or a little comedy?" I asked. "Oh, a comedy!" cried the child. But the lady said she preferred a dance. "A dance is too short," said the boy, "if the distinguished audience wishes. After the dance, we will perform our different roles." This was one of my master's fine phrases. I tried to say it in the same grand manner as he. Upon second thought, I was not sorry that the lady did not wish for a comedy, for I don't see how I could have given a performance. Not only was Zerbino absent, but I had none of the stage fittings with me. I played the first bars of a waltz. Cappy took Dulcie by the waist with his 2 paws, and they whirled round, keeping good time. Then Pretty Heart danced alone. Successively, we went through all our repertoire. We did not feel tired now. The poor little creatures knew that they would be repaid with a meal, and they did their best. I also. Then, suddenly, in the midst of a dance in which all were taking part, Zerbino came out from behind a bush, and as Cappy and Dulcie and Pretty Heart passed near him, he boldly took his place amongst them. While playing and watching my actors, I glanced from time to time at the little boy. He seemed to take great pleasure in what we were doing, but he did not move. He looked as though he was lying on a stretcher. The boat had drifted right to the edge of the bank, and now I could see the boy plainly. He had fair hair. His face was pale, so white that one could see the blue veins on his forehead. He had the drawn face of a sick child. "How much do you charge for seats at your performance?" asked the lady. "You pay according to the pleasure we have given you. Then, Mama, you must pay a lot," said the child. He added something in a language that I did not understand. "My son would like to see your actors nearer." I made a sign to Cappy. With delight, he sprang onto the boat. "And the others!" cried the little boy. Zerbino and Dulcie followed Cappy's example. "And the monkey!" Pretty Heart could have easily made the jump, but I was never sure of him. Once on board, he might do some tricks that certainly would not be to the lady's taste. "Is he spiteful?" she asked. "No, madam, but he is not always obedient, and I am afraid that he will not behave himself. Well, bring him on yourself." She signed to a man who stood near the rail. He came forward and threw a plank across to the bank. With my harp on my shoulder and Pretty Heart in my arms, I stepped up the plank. "The monkey! The monkey!" cried the little boy, whom the lady addressed as Arthur. I went up to him and, while he stroked and petted Pretty Heart, I watched him. He was strapped to a board. "Have you a father, my child?" asked the lady. "Yes, but I am alone just now." "For long?" "For 2 months. 2 months." "Oh, poor little boy. At your age, how is it that you happen to be left all alone?" "It has to be, madam." "Does your father make you take him a sum of money at the end of 2 months?" "Is that it?" "No, madam. He does not force me to do anything. If I can make enough to live with my animals, that is all. And do you manage to get enough?" I hesitated before replying. I felt a kind of awe, a reverence for this beautiful lady. Yet she talked to me so kindly and her voice was so sweet that I decided to tell her the truth. There was no reason why I should not. Then I told her how Vitalis and I had been parted, that he had gone to prison because he had defended me, and how since he had gone I had been unable to make any money. While I was talking, Arthur was playing with the dogs, but he was listening to what I said. "Then how hungry you all must be!" he cried. At this word, which the animals well knew, the dogs began to bark and Pretty Heart rubbed his stomach vigorously. "Oh, Mama!" cried Arthur. The lady said a few words in a strange language to a woman, whose head I could see through a half-open door. Almost immediately the woman appeared with some food. "Sit down, my child," said the lady. I did so at once. Putting my harp aside, I quickly sat down in the chair at the table. The dogs grouped themselves around me. Pretty Heart jumped on my knee. "Do your dogs eat bread?" asked Arthur. "Do they eat bread?" I gave them a piece which they devoured ravenously. "And the monkey?" said Arthur. But there was no occasion to worry about Pretty Heart, for while I was serving the dogs, he had taken a piece of crust from a meat pie and was almost choking himself underneath the table. I helped myself to the pie and, if I did not choke like Pretty Heart, I gobbled it up no less gluttonously than he. "Poor, poor child," said the lady. Arthur said nothing, but he looked at us with wide-open eyes, certainly amazed at our appetites, for we were all as famished as one another, even Zerbino, who should have been somewhat appeased by the meat that he had stolen. "What would you have eaten tonight if you had not met us?" asked Arthur. "I don't think we should have eaten at all. And tomorrow? Perhaps tomorrow we should have had the luck to meet someone like we have today." Arthur then turned to his mother. For some minutes they spoke together in a foreign language. He seemed to be asking for something which at first she seemed not quite willing to grant. Then, suddenly, the boy turned his head. His body did not move. "Would you like to stay with us?" he asked. I looked at him without replying. I was so taken back by the question. "My son wants to know if you would like to stay with us?" repeated the lady. "On this boat? Yes, my little boy is ill, and he is obliged to be strapped to this board. So that the days will pass more pleasantly for him, I take him about in this boat. While your master is in prison, if you like, you may stay here with us. Your dogs and your monkey can give a performance every day, and Arthur and I will be the audience. You can play your harp for us. You will be doing us a service, and we on our side. May be useful to you. To live on a boat. What a kind lady. I did not know what to say. I took her hand and kissed it. Poor little boy, she said almost tenderly. She had said she would like me to play my harp. This simple pleasure I would give her at once. I wanted to show how grateful I was. I took my instrument and, going to the end of the boat, I commenced to play softly. The lady put a little silver whistle to her lips and blew it. I stopped playing, wondering why she had whistled. Was it to tell me that I was playing badly, or to ask me to stop? Arthur, who saw everything that passed around him, noticed my uneasiness. My mamma blew the whistle for the horses to go on. He said, that was so. The barge, towed by the horses, glided over the soft waters which lapped gently against the keel. On either side were trees, and behind us fell the oblique rays from the setting sun. Will you play? Asked Arthur. He beckoned to his mother. She sat down beside him. He took her hand and kept it in his, and I played to them all the pieces that my master had taught me.